why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to do our first round of public comment. So if you are a member of the public here, who's here? Well, actually, before I jump into public comment, maybe let's just do some housekeeping before we get going for the evening. So again, what we'll be doing tonight is we'll be looking at the draft alternatives, and we'll be doing similar to how we did this summer, where we'll have everyone, we'll do a little bit of intro from staff, just kind of reminding people where we are, how we got here, where we're going, and kind of orienting to the information. We're going to be trying a new software today called Miro, and so you can let us know if it seems like a good thing and something that we can put into our outreach and online engagement toolkit. And hopefully it's something that aids us in having a more interactive discussion. And what we'll do is we'll talk about kind of just the intro, and then alternative one. We'll have a time for 1 minute of comment from each person. You can also ask questions at that time on alternative one, and then we'll talk about alternative two, and then have a round of comments, and then alternative three. We wanted to break it up so that we're not hopefully having too much just talking before we're able to engage and have dialogue together. And so that's our goal. And I know there is interplay between the three alternatives, but we feel like it would be, just our experience over the summer, I think was really good, and just how we're able to have more interaction with each other. So we want to try to replicate that if we can. And then just a bit of housekeeping. If you wouldn't mind being on mute when you're not speaking, that's great. And for those of you who are attendees who would like to give public comment, there should be, if you're online, at the bottom of your toolbar, the bottom of your Zoom window, a raise hand function. If you are calling in on the phone, you can press *9, I believe, to raise your hand, and then we'll know that you would like to share a comment. There'll be time now in this beginning portion for public comment, and then also at the end at about 8:15. So with that, I am going to go over to our public comment. I see, last thing, we have Vin Nguyen here with us, who is one of our administrative associates in the Planning and Development Services Department. And you can see Vin is not visible right now. He's got the City of Palo Alto logo. Vin is going to be our timekeeper this evening. And so for our 1 minute portions, when you have 1 minute left, he'll come on screen and say 1 minute, and that will let you know to perhaps finish your sentence or that thought you have, and then to conclude, so we can be mindful of time. For those members of the public who will be making public comment, Ben will time your 3 minutes and let you know when your 3 minutes has elapsed. So I see Arthur Keller and Carrie Wagner as attendees who would like to speak. If we can unmute Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller, you have 3 minutes, and I see now Jeff has also raised his hand. Great. So Mr. Keller can go first.
Mute myself. Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
First of all, all the plans ignore traffic. Traffic reduction is a top city priority. Several years ago, city withdrew a proposed expansion of current Cloudera site because it would create significant impacts. That project was withdrawn. The current MVCAP project from staff all seem to likely to generate more traffic, but there's no traffic study at all. Number two, it ignores our number one housing needs. Affordable housing is a top city priority. For ABAG, the majority of new housing needs to be 80% or less AMI, but the inclusionary housing is not above that level. The staff proposal will likely make zero progress towards our ABAG goals. Worse, it would take land away that would use for such housing. This is simply unacceptable. It doesn't protect R1 housing. The staff proposal puts tall buildings right near single-family houses. This results in this violates our comprehensive plan as outrageously unfair. It doesn't preserve R1. The fourth thing is it doesn't preserve R1. The staff proposal would rezone single-family home parcels, leading to current residents having to leave. The proposed landscape strips also cut into housing sites, and in some cases, actual homes. They cut into actual homes. And five, doesn't address loss of community serving businesses. Tech house offices have been taking over Ventura CS properties, yet no one locally seems to seems to care, which is the purpose of CS zone. Ventura has been allowed to become an office park rather than a neighborhood. These staff proposals do not correct that.
Can we call the next speaker?
Next speaker, Carrie Wagner.
Hi, this is Carrie. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just want to say I live in Charleston Meadows, and I'm very excited at the development in Ventura to see, and I'm very anxious to welcome the new neighbors that live in the housing there. I think this is way overdue, and I'm very pleased y'all are working on this. So I'd like to bring your attention to a long ago proposed bike underpass at basically at Loma Verde and the creek right there. And this was through the Palo Alto Bike and Pedestrian Transportation Plan in July of 2012. I realize some of y'all probably are well aware of this. And it was also looked at in the Midtown Connector feasibility study done in June of 2016. I don't believe there's been budget for it. It hasn't been engineered yet, but with housing going into Ventura and people needing to get to Midtown back and forth, this would get Midtown residents to Ventura, El Camino area, and would get Ventura residents easily into Midtown. It would also be good for my neighborhood because currently South Palo Alto has no protected bike pedestrian paths. There are 4 in North Palo Alto, which is great. I think the more the merrier. We need to keep these kids safe. I use the paths too. We need to keep our adults and our seniors safe. So I'm hoping you will, I realize this isn't part of your plan, but I'm hoping you will like put a placeholder for this underpass where we can, or overpass where we can plan for it in the future. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, our next speaker is Jeff.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all the people who served on the NVCAP and come to all these meetings and such. I have myself lived in Ventura for many, many years and know this neighborhood very, very well, could walk through it blindfolded. And I have to say that I've read through the staff report, and I'm very disappointed to see some major problems with it. First of all, as Arthur mentioned before, traffic. In fact, there's been traffic problems in Ventura for years and years. There was a major effort to try to stop various projects that were going to increase traffic, and I could not find a single mention in the entire staff report of what the traffic impacts would be of all this new development. It's much more than development that was already deemed too much to tolerate. So I think it would have been far better if the traffic studies had been done at the outset to tell you how much more traffic the area could tolerate. That would be how much more office traffic, how much more resident traffic, and then you could develop plans based on those guidelines instead of, you know, the sky's the limit, and then you're going to discover that this would exacerbate traffic. So it would be so horrible that nothing, it just can't be done. The second thing, as Arthur also mentioned, is affordable housing. The goals that we've been given for affordable housing, which is one of the top city priorities, as is traffic, are to produce housing at the 80% and under level. That is, that someone who's earning 80% or less of the average median income in the county should be able to afford this housing. The vast majority of what we're supposed to produce in housing needs to be at that level or not. And yet there's nothing in what the staff is proposing that would achieve that. The city's inclusionary housing requirements don't guarantee any housing will be built at that 80% under levels. It really doesn't. And so you could go ahead with all these plans and then discover things have gotten far worse and that we're further away from our true affordable housing goals. Again, I think it would have been so much better if you start with how to meet those goals and then see what else can be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Arthur, I see your hand still up. Are you going to speak one more time or?
No, we only have one time per person. You can
No,
share
I'm-
again at the end if you would like to.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. Okay, great. So I'm going to hand it over to Claire Campbell, who is our long-range planning manager. She's going to kick off this evening's presentation. Take it away, Claire.
All right.
Well, actually, sorry, we need to do roll call. Sorry, Chitra, did you want to call roll? I'm all out of
Yes.
order today. I'm trying to remember things instead of looking at my agenda. I want to see all of your faces.
Okay, roll call. Angela Della Porta, Kristen Flynn, Terry
Here.
Holsummer,
Here.
Gail Price. I
Here.
saw her. Okay. Heather Rosen,
Here.
Lance Smith, Yunan Song,
Here.
Tim Steele,
Here.
Lakiba Pittman, C. Zhang, Alexander Liu, Keith Rechtel,
Here.
Doria Suma,
Here.
Waldemar Kamatsky.
Here.
Thank you. Yes, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Chitra. So I'll hand it over to Claire Campbell. She'll be starting us off today, and then she'll be followed by Jean Eisberg. Jean Eisberg is been working with the city for quite a while. She is the owner and operator of Lexington Planning, and she has helped us with things such as our retail preservation ordinance and a number of other policy issues in Palo Alto. So she's a familiar face, and we're glad to have her assisting with us this evening. So take it away, Claire.
Great.
So T-Steele is the username.
Tim, you may want to mute your microphone.
Sorry.
No
Giving
worries.
Password.
All right, great.
It means
Welcome,
rescue.
everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our introduction here. So just so you guys, well, Rachel already mentioned, we're going to be shifting between different staff tonight to give you your staff presentation. So welcome. So the purpose of the meeting this evening is to have the working group review the 3 draft plan alternatives that we've been working on since the last meeting, and also for you to provide feedback to staff for further consideration. So just a recap of the things that have been going on in the last few months. So the city's conducted 6 public meetings with the working group members since May. June and July, we had 4 subcommittee meetings that were focused on key issues such as office use, height limits, office space. And the whole idea is to try to find some common understanding and common ground there for us to move forward. In August, we had a working group meeting that focused on transportation and circulation, as well as affordable housing goals. And then for preparation for tonight's meeting, what we did, staff looked through all of the notes that were collected from those working group meetings, and we consolidated those, and we've been reviewing those to determine what the common themes are and what the interests are for the group for us to help us develop these alternatives that we're sharing with you this evening. And also in the staff reports, we outlined some policy strategies for consideration while you're looking at zoning, anti-displacement measures, parking management, and placemaking. So here I'm going to pause, and I'm going to turn this over to Jean for her to take over. And let me stop sharing the screen.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Jean Eisberg with Lexington Planning, and I've been working with staff over the last couple months. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunity sites, and this relates to what Rachel's going to talk about in terms of how each alternative projects a different, estimates a different number of jobs or housing units. And so we did that by the following method. So we looked at potential opportunity sites, the tier 1 sites being the highest potential sites. So these are sites where we know an owner has either expressed interest in development or where the parcels are greater than 10,000 square feet, which are generally more feasible sites for development, and contiguously owned parcels that add up to more than 10,000 square feet. So this first map is showing you those sites. You can see there's some of our larger sites, as well as sites along Park Boulevard.
Jean, can you zoom in a little bit more? Just sorry,
Yeah.
Just zoom in one more.
How's that?
Can you go one more level in? That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So
Thank
you
you.
can see sites on the lower right-hand side of the screen, on the south end of the of the project area, as well as a couple along Lambert. So moving on to our tier 2 sites, we looked at sites where maybe a little less feasible in terms of redevelopment. So the parcel sizes were less than 10,000 square feet, or where there were multiple tenants that may require relocation, but did include sites again where contiguous ownership would allow for that consolidation to a site that was greater than 10,000 square feet. I should mention that we did exclude a number of sites. So if a parcel had redeveloped in the last 10 years, we excluded single family homes or commercial condominiums. We excluded creek easement areas, and we also excluded parcels with approved or in progress applications. So these tier 2 sites, you can see along Olive, where we have some renter occupied units under contiguous ownership, as well as some sites along El Camino and Page Mill. And then in the tier 3 category, these were the lowest potential sites for redevelopment. So these sites had parcel sizes less than 10,000 square feet, or where site acquisition or lot consolidation would be required to get to a 10,000 square foot site threshold. So lastly, just in terms of how we calculated the build out, and excuse me, this is taking a little while to load, so it's a little fuzzy. But you'll notice in the build out in the staff report, we estimated a maximum amount of build out and then a more realistic amount of build out. And so the realistic capacity is just using the top tier sites, so these tier 1 sites in general, and only half of those tier 1 sites that are not the major large sites. So the 340 Portage, 395 Page Mill, where Cloudera is located, as well as 440 Portage at the Equinox site. So again, we're just looking at, in terms of the realistic capacity, the sites with the greatest potential, and did not include the sites, the tier 2 and tier 3 sites that are less easy to develop. And so in general, you'll see going from alternative 1 to alternative 2 and alternative 3, we made assumptions with increasing building height as you move through those alternatives, a decrease in the unit size. And so as a result, you're seeing higher density in alternative 2 and then a higher density in alternative 3 in terms of the overall unit yield and in terms of the overall amount of jobs that are generated. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass this back to Rachel, I believe.
Great. So I think my screen is sharing. Is that correct? All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So then the question becomes, how did we get from the opportunity sites to where we are? So the other thing that we did was we took all of the feedback we got from this summer, and I'm not speaking to a specific slide right now, all the feedback that we got from the summer and all of the various items that the working group members that you all answered questions about, what kind of height might you like to see? What would be the best location for a park in your opinion? What might be good locations for taller buildings or different types of uses? And we sorted that all out. That you have in your packet, you had the kind of large tabloid sized sheets that kind of recorded everyone's thoughts and comments and kind of some of the commonalities. And then we began kind of say, okay, well, we had, 30 some odd questions and then some. And so how might those look in different alternatives? And we began to sort those into the 3 alternatives to try to understand what could things look like under different scenarios. And so that's what you have in your packet. In terms of, this is a very dated map that we have here. This is back from before, from the very, very beginning of the project. And so you can see some of the items are a little bit dated in terms of, this is no longer Mike's Bikes here, but you can get a sense for the site and kind of reorient ourselves to where we're talking about. And some of the things that we did across all alternatives are to relocate some of the taller densities on El Camino and along Page Mill. That being a location that with its busier streets, as well as the larger scale of streets, a larger scale of building would not overwhelm the pedestrian environment and would better match the scale of the street there. We also propose to have a height and density bonus for 100% below market rate or 100% workforce housing on parcels fronting on Page Mill or El Camino, kind of really wrapping the site. And while that doesn't guarantee that that housing would be affordable, it does encourage developers to build either market rate housing or to build affordable, more affordable workforce housing. And workforce housing could be deed restricted and would be in this case to get the bonus so that it really is affordable to families within like the 120 to 150% AMI, those who aren't reached by the traditional affordable housing. And so that would be a way to provide a little bit of higher height, but again, only for those projects that are meeting the goals that the city has set out. We've also proposed in some areas to remove the current restriction of the 35 feet for mixed use a 35-foot height limit for mixed use development when it's within 150 feet of residential use. So for example, these are R1 zone here, homes on Pepper Avenue and on Olive. And so normally within 150 feet of this border between the yellow and the red, you'd have to have only 35 feet. Again, that's something we'd love to hear working group members' feedback on, but that is not proposed to be maintained in this current proposal. And instead, we propose our landscape setbacks along these frontages along these property lines to create that buffer space between the single family home area and a higher density housing development. And you'll see different open space schemes throughout the proposals. And really that is built in to think about as there's more development, how can we take advantage of that to build more parks and more recreational areas for the plan area. So moving on to, I'm going to start with mobility as well, and then I'm going to go into, again, items that are specific to each alternative. So transportation improvements, and please, if at any time that it's not zoomed in enough or you can't see it, please let me know. Or if I'm driving too fast around the board, let me know so that we can make sure that you're able to track what's happening. So the transportation improvements were similar for all of the alternatives, and you'll see them there. You don't see them in the alternative, but we wanted to create a separate layer so it would be easier to understand. And I'm just going to kind of work my way around from left, going around all the way to the right. So what you see is you see on Park Boulevard, proposal to remove the street parking on Park Boulevard in order to provide a better bike and pedestrian environment, reducing the number of curb cuts overall and widening the bike lane there to make it better for biking. We also note that here at this intersection, we need improvements, particularly if we are going to have better bike infrastructure and perhaps more bikers using this bike boulevard. We need to think about how bikers cross the street and how they're interacting with vehicles when they get to this intersection. We are looking at Olive Avenue, having no street parking on Olive Avenue on the north side, which is right here along this Cloudera abutting side, again, in order to enhance the pedestrian environment and the biking environment as well. We are looking at Ash Street to consider a one-way southbound. Again, would like to hear more feedback on that. That's one way to consider traffic calming, but we certainly want to do some pedestrian and bicycle signaling and crosswalks here at Page Mill. We may not be able to do a crosswalk because we would need a signal and we would need to work with the county on that. We don't think it likely that they would be supportive of another stop here because it's so close to the El Camino Real stop, but we would like them to tell us no before we just assume no. And if the county wouldn't permit that, what else could we do here to help facilitate pedestrian crossing at Ash Street? At this intersection, and that's what those red circles mean, that there's going to be improvements at that intersection. We would like to do some traffic calming interventions. In speaking with our Office of Transportation and speaking with all of you at our transportation focus session, it might be a good idea to have some speed humps as folks are approaching the stop sign on this intersection here, or to do a raised intersection. Those are some ideas of some treatments, as well as a traffic circle. So you can see those red lines here of places where some kind of speed hump or again, other intervention might be a good idea. Particularly here where there is there's an intersection, three ways, but not that four-way intersection could again be a good place to have a crossing as well as here on Olive to make sure if folks are crossing mid-block that they're able to cross safely. You can see on the Cloudera parcel that we're proposing that there be these orange dotted lines, new improved bike and pedestrian connections. This is obviously a very large parcel and a mega block, and we would want to make sure that bikes and pedestrians can get across that safely. It really enhances pedestrian activity when there's more ways to get across a large parcel like that. And again, a lot of the interventions here at this corner, there are a number that have been studied and proposed, as well as here. And really it's trying to make sure that we can have good pedestrian infrastructure, good bike infrastructure, as well as good speeds of traffic, and discouraging people from using these streets to cut through. By slowing them down, it makes it safer, but it also makes it less desirable for someone to try to take a shortcut on those routes. When it comes to Acacia, we would like to see Acacia become a proper street with actual sidewalks and other places so that folks know how to walk and bike safely on Acacia. We would propose, though, not to have a curb cut from Acacia onto Park Boulevard. Again, as we're trying to reduce the number of vehicular access points on Park to enhance it as a bike and pedestrian thoroughfare, we thought that that could be a one place that could not have a curb cut here. And if someone wanted to park in this parking lot, they would come off of El Camino onto Acacia, and then they could park, and then they could go back out the same way. You also can see that we're trying this way across the site to have some connections for bikes and pedestrians. You can see here, whether it be somehow through the Cannery Building, or if the Cannery Building were not there, to have another bike and pedestrian connection. And here, the Ash Street connection to also enhance this as a connection point for bikes and pedestrians. It can also be for a vehicular connection as well, but we'd really want to see if we can enhance that. You can also see a bike and pedestrian path here along the creek. And then especially as this becomes a new park, new expanded Bulwark Park, having a safe crossing here for pedestrians and bicyclists as they're going to and from the park, and really encouraging those park users to come into the site, and likewise folks to exit out here. We heard mention of the Loma Verde bike connection, and so it's a little bit off the screen here, but that is indicating what we would like to see in that connection there. And we just have a note here that on El Camino Real, under the design guidelines that are currently in place, there's a 12-foot effective sidewalk width, which is a really great, wide, generous sidewalk, as well as a 12-foot setback of buildings. So again, providing some open space, some greenery, landscape setback there on El Camino. And so that is our transportation section. Let me just make sure I said everything. And it's generally consistent across all of the plan areas. So what we're going to do now is head into the alternatives, and just a little bit again how we're going to go about this. I'll kind of walk through this slide, and then we're going to go around and do 1 minute of comments and questions. And we're going to use these sticky notes here. These are little sticky notes that we can grab. So I'll grab one, and we'll take notes of what everyone is saying and the questions that you have throughout your 1 minute of feedback. Okay, so alternative one is really trying to think about a lot of the feedback we heard around, how to enhance the site with maintaining the Cannery Building. And what the proposal is for the Cannery Building at 340 Portage is to retain the building, to have it remain, and that it could be retained and used for office and retail, which is what it currently is used for, or it could be adaptively reused into housing. And so, allowing there to be multifamily housing in that adaptively reused building. In addition, there's proposal to allow townhomes here on the surface parking lot up to 35 feet in height, which, here currently there's a 30-foot height limit on the R1 zone parcels over here in the plan area. And so similar height to that. We also, looking at one of the other large parcels, the Cloudera site, would allow that current office building to remain, and it would continue in its existing use, and then have a similar to this 340 Portage to have townhomes on the parking lot at the Cloudera site. Redevelopment may not be likely under that condition based on some information we have from the property owner, but you never know, and they may make a different decision in the future. And then we did want to retain, add some landscaping here and retain the landscaping berm here with some really nice mature trees that are located there. And then you can see on the outer edge, the multifamily retail mixed use corridor here, idea being that it would be multifamily housing with potentially retail on the ground floor. And then you have the landscape buffer here between the single family home areas and the other development areas and these buildings. And again, where it says 50 feet, the height limit would be unchanged, but you would have the 70-foot up to 70 feet for 100% affordable or 100% workforce housing developments. In this orange area, you have what we're calling a mixed use district. It's office and commercial that can remain, that's currently there until it's no longer in use. And then it would convert to ground floor or to residential with ground floor retail if desired. So essentially, if you're an existing office use right now and you say, hey, I want to build housing instead, we would say that is great. When you build that new building of housing, you can build retail underground floor or other retail-like uses, but you cannot build back any of your office uses. And so that would hopefully see the turnover of office sites into housing with retail on the ground floor. We do need to look at the proposed 35-foot height limit here, just to ensure that there's no net loss in density in accordance with SB 330. And then lastly, sorry, I'm jumping a little bit around the map here. We are not proposing any changes for the R1 zone properties on Pepper and this block between Pepper and Olive. We would allow for R2 zoning proposed for these single family homes along Olive. So that's something. And then we're proposing the parking garage remain here and surface parking lot would remain here on the 340 Portage site. I'll say Jean, Chitra, or Claire, anything that I didn't cover on this alternative?
The creek area?
The creek.
Yeah, the open space.
Great. So you can see that the creek here is proposed to have kind of basically a walking path along it and within essentially the creek easement that's there. And we would want to look at ways to raise funds to do some restoration if we could, but hopefully at least to have some pedestrian enhancements along that creek within the easement area. And then, without hopefully boring everyone too much, I do want to say we have in our Miro board the details that were provided in the staff report regarding the development potential of these alternatives. So you can see for alternative 1, which we're just discussing, a realistic potential of about 500 units, max of about 860 housing units. New office commercial space, about 8,600, new retail, parks and open space would be about 1.2 acres. And then some of that includes that kind of lighter green color that you saw. And then a number of potential development sites, 16 to 23. One of the reasons why this, I just want to note the 1.2 acres may seem a little bit low. You're like, well, that doesn't seem like there's that much green space. Part of what we assume is for some of these orange parcels, that they would have additional open space on site. But because we don't know exactly how that might develop or where that green space would be, we didn't illustrate it. Because let's say, you know, all of their site control here and someone is able to gain access and purchase all these properties in redevelopment. Well, maybe the park would be one large park, but maybe there's 4 or 5 developments that go on and there might be a series of smaller pocket parks. And so we didn't want to illustrate it to give a mixed impression, but the idea is that there would be open space provided in some portion of these sites as well. Okay, so before we, Jean, Chitra, anything, Claire, anything else that we want to say about the alternative 1?
I think you covered it.
Okay. So again, we have alternatives 2 and 3. I would invite, of course, anyone to provide any comment that they want to provide. We love to hear comments from everyone, no matter what you have to say. But just keep in mind that we do have other alternatives. So if another alternative is your preferred one, like let's say you're a big fan of alternative 2, you might consider not making comments to try to make alternative 1 into alternative 2. Because we're okay with having the 3 separate ones. But is there some question you have about alternative 1, something you'd like refined, something you really like that you'd like to retain in it, something that you think might be adjusted? Those are some ways you might think about using this time. So what I'm going to do is I would like to keep sharing the screen so you all can see it, but I want to see your faces. How do I do that? So I can better navigate this. Show video panel. All right, that didn't work. All right, well, I will have to just use the list of attendees. So what I'll do is we'll kind of be taking notes, and if anybody needs me to zoom in on something when you're speaking, you can just go ahead and say that, and then I'll zoom in on that. And it's one of those times where I really wish we could be in person, but unfortunately we are not able to do that. So with that, Claire, do you mind managing who is going and by calling on different working group members? I'm just not able to see people if they raise their hand right now.
Yeah, okay, so so should I just start off with going through the working group? Oh, I'm sorry.
How you raise the hand?
How do you raise your hand?
Mhm.
You can raise your hand by going to the bottom of your screen, I believe. There should be a taskbar.
Yeah, there is a taskbar, but there's no raise hand option.
Nope.
It's under participants. You open up participants at the bottom and it says raise hand.
Yeah, the list. Okay, well, I have the list ready to go, and I can just kind of work from the top down.
Sylvia
So
has her hand up right now.
Oh, Sylvia, would you like to add something for staff?
Yeah, sorry. Rachel, I think I didn't want to interrupt you. That presentation was amazing. The transportation board had the Park and Portage intersection on there. It was at the top, it was kind of cut off. I think you inadvertently omitted talking about that. The top right.
I'm sorry, where is it?
The top right corner of text on this board.
Oh, here?
Yeah, and if you follow the
yes,
arrow.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Just want to let you know. Thanks.
Yes, sorry. Thank you. We did propose that this would be, right now, there's actually 2 driveway cuts here. There's one at Portage, and then there's one kind of like around here-ish. So we'd propose to remove one and have just one here. And then we've talked a lot about having this stretch in particular of Portage be very, very bike and pedestrian, not almost friendly, but like that it really would be not desirable for cars to drive down here, but that they could get through. And again, really trying to make this not in a desirable way to cut through the neighborhood, but for those who do want to come out at this stoplight here, which is an important stoplight at the end of Portage, for those who need to go south on El Camino and turn left, we want to maintain access to that stoplight. And so really it's about how do you discourage people from certainly driving fast here, but of course also just limiting the flow of folks wanting to come out this way. Anything else, Sylvia, that you want to say about the transportation improvements or locations?
I'm sorry, can I just see the text that you put there in the corner?
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay.
Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So the first person that I have, I'm just going to go in order that I've got on the list that I have here. So
Sounds great.
Waldeck first.
And Vin is going to time us.
Great.
Okay, so my comments are to the transportation improvements. And I thought that we spent significant amount of time on Park Boulevard, and our comments were along the lines that this is not just bicycle connection, but it's also supposed to be a very nice pedestrian connection of the whole Ventura neighborhood toward Caltrain and California Avenue. And I just don't see this thing indicated clearly enough. I see that there is a green buffer, but that doesn't mean necessarily, like enlarged pedestrian connection that would allow larger groups of people traveling along during the lunchtime and stuff. So I thought that was pretty much agreed to by all the members when we were talking about it. So I thought that was kind of given. And the second thing about that,
1 minute.
Yes. Okay,
Okay.
very quickly. I kind of agree with Arthur that the traffic improvements are not, they are not spoken enough about. That I have concern that the things are still not addressed as far as the traffic through the neighborhood.
Okay, great. I do want to remind folks that we haven't done any traffic studies with this, and we cannot do any traffic studies right now. So we're not going to have professional traffic analyses at this juncture of the planning process.
Okay, the next speaker is Tim.
Yeah, can you go back to the transportation exhibit, please?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the diversity and the three alternatives I believe we're going to be seeing tonight. In this one particularly, you've called out that the existing cannery building at 340 Portage would be remaining and potentially repurposed at some point, or continue to be used as it currently is. The idea that you would close down the or try to move towards closing down the exit or entry curb cut onto Park on that side of the building completely, based on how that building would function over time, I think is an unrealistic expectation in either the existing building or a repurposing of that building with other kinds of uses. As an example, right now, the building's been used to have as many as 7 tenants. It is not a street that goes through that parking lot today. It's an actual parking lot. So to expect someone that has frontage, office existing building frontage onto Park, not to use their frontage and to have to go back out through the parking lot in a very narrow parking lot, I don't think is a practical, safe thing to consider while using the building the way it currently is configured.
Okay, so I'm going to just pause for a second. I know it's 6:15 and we've got, quite a while to go. It does seem like we may need to break up to have a time for people to comments on transportation improvements and then the alternatives, just based on what I'm hearing so far. I know Waldeck didn't really get to comment on the alternative and neither did Tim. So why don't we just do a round very quickly on transportation, 1 minute, and then we can do alternative 1. So please raise your hands to queue up. It helps Claire to not have to find everybody and figure out who needs to speak next. But we will go to everybody. So if you don't raise your hand, we'll try to make sure we get to you as well. So who would like to go next?
So the next person that I've got is Terry.
Okay. Go ahead, Terry. Are you there, Terry?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So we're just talking about traffic. I was going to talk about alternative 1. So
sorry, sorry to switch gears on you. Or if you don't have anything comments on transportation, I can switch back to the alternative 1, but just based on those two.
I guess my comment about traffic is, again, something you already stated, Rachel, which was we don't have any traffic studies. And so that's very frustrating, I think, for all of us. I'd like to think it is. And not to have some idea about how a 7-story tall building of residence is going to impact traffic in the area, especially the Ventura neighborhood and those people that live on Olive and Pepper, is really, well, to be honest with you, I think it's shameful. I mean, I think not to have some analysis, at least have some idea to base our alternatives, whatever alternative we choose, and not to have some understanding of the traffic impacts, which is one of the, as you well know, Rachel, it's one of the goals of City Council and one of the goals of the city is to mitigate traffic concerns. And so if it's not at the very top, it's certainly number 2. And so not to have those understandings is very frustrating. So that's what I have to say.
Great, thank you, Terry. Who's next?
Angela?
Thank
Angela,
you.
are you there?
Yes. So regarding transportation, first I want to echo what Waldeck said, because I agree we should really be focusing on pedestrians and bikes, and a widened sidewalk on that west side where the shade is would be ideal. And I think that needs to be included. But I also note that there are 4 streets that would be used as cut-throughs to Park Boulevard, encouraging car traffic, actually 3 streets, sorry, Olive, Portage, and Lambert. And that would encourage more traffic on Park rather than less traffic. And I really think we need to do something, a lot, to reduce traffic, not increase the traffic on Park. And one thing that you could do would be to encourage the car traffic to go on Acacia and not on Portage. Somehow reduce or cut back the car traffic on Portage. And one way you could do that would be to put a traffic light at Acacia and El Camino. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. It's unlikely that there would be a traffic light at Acacia so close to a traffic light at Portage. Again, El Camino is a state road, and so we have limited ability to impact their traffic flow. But as you approach this intersection here, they're going to want to have more space between traffic lights and this intersection. So having it at Acacia is unlikely. Retaining the light that exists at Portage is far more likely to persist. And so taking advantage of that street light is part of why Portage is still open to traffic and to vehicular traffic. But definitely note your comments here, and we'll go to the next speaker.
Alex?
I don't have any comments on transportation.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Doria?
Say me.
Yeah, Doria.
Okay, sorry. So I'll try to go in a minute. I agree with Terry that it's very hard to make recommendations in the dark here without understanding the impacts. I think we have to remember also that anything we do here is going to impact one of the worst intersections in Palo Alto, which is Page Mill Road, El Camino. I agree with Angela and Waldeck that we should do as much as we can to improve Park Boulevard for pedestrians and bicycles and taking cars away and figuring out if we can do something to improve that awkward, old-fashioned kind of a cloverleaf getting on and off Page Mill would be very important for safety. Yeah. And I think you should be very careful about one-way streets and make sure that people living and using those streets are okay with it. And then I wanted to establish that a 12-foot effective sidewalk is that means that it's 12 feet wide, but it can be, it's not all 12 feet because it will be interrupted by planters or tree planters. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
So
Claire,
what is the actual functional, because we really need trees in this whole area. So what would the functional width be? So let's think about it that way a little bit maybe also. Fine.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Gail is next.
Gail, are you on mute?
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
All right, thank you. One quick question. Are any of these improvements already identified in the bike and pedestrian plan?
I'm going to pass that to Sylvia. Sylvia, are you there?
Hi. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had to get my mouse. The Park Boulevard is identified as a bicycle boulevard. I don't believe we identified any, I'm not sure we identified any improvements in this stretch. I know that we've identified improvements and, you know, we've identified improvements for other parts of Park. I just can't remember if there's anything there. I don't believe we did anything internal to the NV Cap site, okay. your study area.
Okay, thank you. The other thing too, this parcel, this study area has a 5 to 25 year development potential. And so my question is there going to be a section that talks about emerging trends in transportation and mobility, assumptions about car usage, the evolution of the use of the car, parking management, since the site is so close to transit? So I just wanted a clarification on that, because this is kind of a moment in time defined 2020.
Time.
And when you say, is there going to be a section, you mean a section of the plan? Is that?
But my issue is in the plan itself, will
Mhm.
there be a section that discusses emerging mobility and transportation trends that could have impacts regarding modifications and approaches to the use of cars and assumptions about car ownership?
That's certainly something we can take a look at. I think we do want to make sure we include, new trends. I think that kind of gets the car ownership trends and things like that would get towards our parking standards and other things of that nature. So we certainly, will take a look at that. I don't know that we have anything particular other than really trying to focus on bikes and pedestrians and reduce, potentially proposed reduced car parking standards. As well as for the development that does occur here, we could look at, I know Office of Transportation is working on enhancing our transportation demand management, which is helping businesses and development manage how people get to their site and encouraging bikes, pedestrians, and also transportation. And so to the degree that our city overall is moving in that direction, I think this would certainly be part of that.
And there'll be a discussion about shuttle services and potential improvements?
I don't know if that's included in the TDM plan. I don't know that we would require it, but I don't know, Sylvia, if you want to give any insight into the TDM planning process that's undergoing and how new transportation elements or methods will build into the TDM planning process.
So we're very early in the TDM ordinance. It's not a plan, it's an ordinance update. So we're very early in it. So I'm not sure. I'm sure we will be referencing shuttles and that kind of thing. But I'm not sure if it's going to be at the scale that Gail's talking about.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who's next?
Heather.
I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
Okay, no worries. Thanks.
Keith?
Okay, there's a lot of me too here. The Ash, I personally would like the one-way on Ash, but I would recommend outreach to the neighbors, make sure that they're happy with it. There is a cut through and they will reduce the cut through. The biggest thing is park traffic. Yeah, I would bike with my kids through there and I'd always be very scared just because there's parked cars and so hard to get lost. So getting rid of the parked cars would be very good. But then it's just not the cars turning onto that, through the curb cuts, but there's also just the volume and the speed. And so we have to address both of those. This is a bike boulevard and it should be car traffic on it should be treated as if it is a bike boulevard. And right now it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Great,
that's
thank
it.
you.
Thank you. So Kirsten is next.
Okay, I have a couple of comments. First, I think that the connection, Rachel, you had mentioned that the connection between Acacia and Portage might also, between Acacia and Portage near El Camino.
Oh, okay.
Might be allowed to be, you have to tell me how to say it. Woonerf?
Oh yeah, Woonerf, yes.
A Woonerf. Might be allow cars. And I think that is essential because I agree with Rachel that we can't get rid of we can't make them move the light. The light is where the light is on El Camino Real. Second, I love the idea of raised crosswalks because when a car enters a raised crosswalk, they are entering a pedestrian zone. And that raising the crosswalk to the height of the sidewalk makes the cars feel like they are an intruder in a pedestrian zone. And other than that, I think I like everything, especially I like the idea of a future Alma Loma Verde bike underpass connection.
Great, thank you.
And Yunnan is next, last.
I don't have much to add. Based on the current, we don't have any data on the traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one more thing? Kirsten reminded me of something. The Loma Verde crossing, I like that. Connections to Gun and through the Palo Alto Research Park would be really good, or the Stanford Research Park. Right now,
I'm sorry, say it again, Keith. It's connection to what?
Okay, right now, if we have a crossing at the Matadero Creek to get across the train tracks and get across Alma, those people, a lot of those are going to want to go to Gun or go to the Stanford Research Park. And so we have to plan a good way of getting from Park Boulevard all the way into the research lab
Mm-hmm.
and connecting to the Bull Park bike path that a lot of people from Gun take. So
Plus,
I see. Yeah.
plus one on that idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus two.
Me too on Loma Verde. Me too on
Okay.
Loma Verde.
So lots of good ideas to get some more connections to and through the site to these other destination points. Great feedback.
and also on the other side too, getting, once you cross El Camino, you still have to get it to the research park, and there's no good way of doing that right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think I captured everybody. Did I miss anyone?
I think that's everyone.
This is Sylvia. Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Just wanted to say that Keith did jog my memory. I believe the bike plan does mention, as Terry Wagner mentioned earlier, the bike plan does mention that overcrossing of the rail, over or undercrossing of the rail, and getting an east-west connection to the areas that Keith mentioned is, I believe, an explicit goal or something that we talk about in the bike plan.
Great, which I think is being updated soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're starting to at least get trying to get the funds ready for it and start talking about a framework for it. So yeah, it's exciting.
Great. Okay, so we're going to return to alternative. Sorry, zooming way too much in. Alternative 1, and I'm going to just move your comment, Waldeck. I think I may have already moved it, and we'll kind of start again with just alternative 1 specific comments. Who'd like to go first?
So I've got my list. So now that we're focused just on this, Waldeck, do you have anything else to add to your last comment?
Are you there, Waldeck?
Trouble with unmuting and muting. No, I'm just ready for scheme 1 comments.
I think that's where we are.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, not trying to make this thing basically similar to others, but I think that the requirement that the office buildings cannot be redeveloped undermines the scheme, at least in my eyes. So if we can put any other restrictions trying to squeeze this square footage of the offices, if that's the idea of the scheme, I think the worst possible way is saying that they cannot redevelop as the offices, because basically what we are doing, we are just putting in stone a bunch of substandard buildings that never going to be developed, and therefore, just whole neighborhood not going to improve. So if there could be any other language trying to achieve a goal of limiting the office areas without saying that you cannot redevelop, I would appreciate.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, Tim, you're next.
No comments, thanks.
Okay, Terry.
Okay, it's hard to say in 1 minute what I have to say. First of all, alternative 1 does retain the cannery building, which I totally support for all the reasons I've already previously stated. But I do have some concerns, especially along El Camino and Page Mill. My concerns there is for the real residents of the Pepper and Olive area. We shouldn't have extremely tall buildings next to really what we call a residential or R1 neighborhood. I'm very concerned about not only the effects of shadows and traffic and all the other elements, but of how this impacts the residents themselves. I think whenever we upzone an area, we do displace people. And displacing is not something that should be our goal ever. And so we should incorporate those people and make sure that all of those people are not displaced in any way. And I think that's sometimes forgotten in this process, is that, yes, it's wonderful to build tall buildings and residential, but it's not okay to displace people. And I have other concerns really quickly. I'd like to
Okay,
mention
you're
that
over your minute, but keep going.
we never received a creek report, and I'd like to understand why.
Okay,
Thank
we're gonna have another meeting. I think Claire may have mentioned that about the creek specifically. So again, we'll just keep focused on alternative one. One quick response to one of your comments, Terry. There are some provisions of SB 330 which do require some protections for current tenants in terms of if redevelopment of a property that they're renting occurs, relocation, and also rights of return. So there are some provisions at the state level that do help to prevent or try to mitigate displacement concerns. So we're happy to discover that as part of the law that would apply here. Okay, who's next?
Okay, so Angela's next.
Great. Can I just quickly, before my time starts, ask a question about how you're going to be using the comments that we make today? And also, how are we going to make comments about like placemaking and things like that that don't fit into one of the three alternatives?
So I think placemaking, will apply to any of the three. And so, it's a couple of things. One is we'll also provide an online survey for you to provide more detailed comments, or just if you think about things later on that you didn't get a chance to say, or comments that you feel like you just didn't have a place to fit tonight. Placemaking, I think, would be overarching. Like, let's say we wanted to have 12-foot sidewalks, for example, as a way to enhance pedestrian environment. That could be on any of the alternatives, right? That could fit as a design criteria or a design standard. Or if it was something really specific, like let's have murals at this location, that's really at a level of detail that we're not at yet. And so we can keep adding that, as we go forward. Really that where we go from here is from one alternative to Planning and Transportation Commission recommending a preferred alternative to council, and then council ultimately selecting a preferred alternative that will then have more study and more refinement. And so that's another time where we get to some more of those details once we know amongst the three what we're doing. Then it's easier to plan, for example, where is public art going to be when you know where the parks may be, for example, or where some other public spaces might be. So I don't know if that answers your question, Angela.
My second question, yes, but my first question, how you're going to actually use the comments we make today? Are you going to be changing the alternatives or?
Well, certainly if we got something that was an overwhelming consensus, we would maybe make a change. If, everyone said, wow, this thing is great, or this thing is terrible. We may get some of what we're getting now, which is a mix of comments that don't necessarily support one way or the other. And so we would capture that and use that in our report out to the Planning and Transportation Commission.
So any comment that we agree with, we should make that really clear so that you can get a sense of whether or not there is consensus. Like
yes, that would be helpful.
Sidewalk.
Yes.
Comment. Yes. Okay. All right. So, okay, now my time can begin regarding alternative one. Thank you very much for letting me ask questions. So I agree with Terry that the tall buildings along El Camino and Page Mill Road are of concern. I know that stepping back from single family homes might be a solution, but yeah, I am concerned to see that. I think it would be really hard on them. But my bigger concern is that there are only 1.2 acres of park space planned, when it should be for that number of new residents, 4.8 acres. And that really concerns me. I know that cost is a problem, but I think we need to somehow let the city council know that they need to find the money somehow. Just as they need to find the money for affordable housing, they need to find the money to live up to their comp plan. Which is would be 4.8 acres, not 1.2. So 4 times as much. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Alex, you're up.
Okay, I've got 3 comments. So the first one is, it seems like alternative 1 for the mixed district area, it looks like you're downzoning those properties, but those are actually the tier 1 more likely candidates for development. So that doesn't really seem to make sense to me. I'm thinking that those should be the places that the landowners are more interested in development should maximize. We should try to maximize the housing on those sites. My second comment is on the south side of Olive. I think you're showing it as duplexes. And if you look at the new state and local codes regarding ADUs, I think it's actually more advantageous to keep that as R1 with regard to setbacks and the 800 square feet of bonus floor area. And then my third comment is on the 340 Portage site, like along the creek, you're showing two different zone districts, like one in yellow and one in orange. And I think my understanding is that that's all one parcel. So I think you're creating something that's kind of difficult, and I think it's better to keep it the same, whichever way it works. And that's all.
Yeah, just on that quick note, Alex, right around here, there's a separate parcels here on the creek.
Yeah.
Somewhere here and then across the street. But certainly this is all, this ash building is with this parking area, what is currently a parking area here.
Great.
But noted that subdividing a parcel is not always great, or having different zoning.
Great. So Doria, you're next.
Thank you. I can't possibly do this in 1 minute, but I agree with Alex that the going from R2 with the what is R1 doesn't make sense with the ADU and JADU laws. Actually, the Fry site extends beyond the creek. On the other side of the creek, there's a building there, which so that's important to note. He's right about that. You don't mention retention of the historic resource. That's the second smaller building. I have a question about, I have always questioned the sanity of having really tall buildings in the dark orange places, or if that's red maybe, along Page Mill and El Camino, because those are the places where, well, part of it at least, the part that abuts low density residential, where we really need that transition zone. And I note that on page 4 of the staff report, bullet 2 and bullet 3 directly contradict each other about the retention of the transition zone, which I think is a key rule of planning. And I also think you underutilize housing in this area in general by not using basically the east side or the train side of Park Boulevard and continuing the pattern that's already started there with the Hobach building on the corner, Park Plaza, I think it's called, and rezoning that. And it's not GM, it's mostly being used as general office, rezoning that. And there you could actually go higher and there would be no objections for multifamily housing. And I also think workforce housing is not compatible in any sense to below market rate housing. And I did have a question about the page 26, the density for the plan area. Is this a time you could answer that?
Sure.
So it says aspirational density. I think that means population density at the bottom of the page for each alternative. It's page 26.
Sorry.
I just don't know when else to ask this.
Well, can I write it down and then we can maybe come back to it?
It's the section is aspirational density, and it then is the aspirational density for each of the 3 alternative areas. So I had a question about that. We can address it later if that's better.
Okay, yeah, let's try to get through this and then we'll, or yellow means it's a question. So hopefully we can come back to it. And if we can't come back to it tonight, we can at least try to email or chat with you after. Thank you, Doria.
And Gail is next.
Gail, are you with us?
Yeah, okay, I'm having trouble hearing, I couldn't tell when my name was called. Okay, first a quick question. When we have the session on Matadero Creek, will there be a clarification regarding the easements and restrictions regarding development close to the creek?
Yeah, we can have clarification. There's not really any, I don't know if you're speaking about specific restrictions, but.
Yeah, it's come up a couple of times regarding the limits to how close development could be considered.
Well, there's an easement that's 30 feet.
Or allowed, by Santa
Yeah.
Clara Water District. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other quick question, 395, is that the Cloudera site?
Yes.
Okay, so my comments, I am really not in favor of this option. I think that the restriction on the office and the small retail issues really limit the possibilities for this area. And I think frankly, this area deserves better. I think this is a sub-regional area that close to transit, it's close to commercial, retail. There are lots of, it's an opportunity site that really needs a variety of housing for different income groups. And the way this reads, we are way far away from that goal. There is no way this particular alternative would begin to address in any meaningful way the RENA numbers that are going to be assigned to Palo Alto.
Time.
So this is a little change, very little change, if any. And I guess I feel it's not the most valuable plan for this area, in my opinion. It does the least, and I'm not impressed.
Thank you, Gail.
Okay, Heather is next.
I don't think I have anything useful to add. Thanks.
Do you want to underscore anything or yes and something that anybody else said?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. So Keith, you're next.
Okay, I've got 5 of them. Let's go. First one, we need more parks. I agree with Angela. We have to recommend to the city that they have to find the money. If we're adding people here, we have to add parks. Parks are important for everyone, not just people in North Palo Alto. It's an equity issue. Number 2, I agree that R1 with ADU is probably a better answer for Olive. So we really should look into that. That I think is a better way of getting denser housing there. The third, I agree with Alex about more housing in the orange areas. Those should be, we should do our best to get housing there. Particularly, we should have a sunset date for that mixed district, because otherwise what Waldeck said is true, that they're just going to sit there forever with the same buildings. If we want them to be redeveloped, we should put a date on that and have them convert to 100% housing. 4 is tall buildings next to Olive and Pepper. I'm not wild about that. Over further by Portage, I think that's fine. But next to Olive and Pepper with no step down, not a fan of that. And finally, workforce housing is fine, but it's not a replacement for BMR. We are producing almost nothing in the lower 2 BMR categories, and we have to address that. So workforce is fine, but we have to also make a big effort for BMR. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Kirsten.
Hello. Okay. First of all, before my time starts, the information on the no net loss is on page 12 of the packet. If Terry wants to kind of review the way that 350 works.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Certainly. So now I'm going to start on plan 1. Having no parks at all in this area feels a bit punitive. I feel like there is some benefit to the property owners on this plan, some development potential. I think this option should be, we should work harder to make this into an option that could actually get built and would meet some of the city's needs. And some of those options would be including micro parks at Portage and Park and at Olive and Park, and a play-sized park on the Cloudera site, meaning a big square playable park. In order to make that happen, I think we could allow more density on the northwest side of the lot at Ash and Portage, the lot between Portage and Acacia, and the northwest side of the lot and at Ash and Page Mill. And the reason I'm specific about which side the density could be on is that whether it's next to something that's short or not, Also, I think that the lots around El Camino Real and Portage near Park are better locations for retail than the lots that are adjoining Portage between Keisha and Lambert. it indicates ground floor retail there, and I don't think it would be viable there. And so I would accept ground floor office there. And again, since that's something that would benefit a developer, it might help us leverage to get the parks that we need. I did redraw this plan, and I'll text you or
I
email
was
you.
going to say, if you have those written down, as you can see, I did not capture everything in my notes, but
yeah, it was
sounded
a lot.
like you had
Sorry.
it written.
It's the minute limit, you know.
Yeah, no, that was really great. That was very thorough. I was couldn't catch up quite with my typing and my listening.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I talked.
Oh no, it's
Okay.
great. That's excellent. Thank you for your attentiveness and detail orientation. I appreciate that.
Okay, great. So our last person is Yunan.
First, I like the idea the cannery building is kept. Second, yes, we need more parks. The third is I do feel the orange color and the red color, they are the opposite. So along El Camino and especially close to Pepper, Olive, they have residents there. We should not put those very high building there. And these buildings are only for residential mixed use. And for the orange one, which is with inside some blocks, and we are now put it as mixed use like office or commercial. I feel these two, they are the opposite. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes all of the speakers for alternative one.
Okay, it's 6:50. We're not doing too bad, everyone. Not doing too bad, especially for adding in the transportation. So thank you all. And again, I do recognize a minute is short, but it does at least kind of let everyone get a flavor of what we each all are thinking and considering.
I have a procedural comment.
Yeah.
So how you want to go about this consensus building? Do you want like everybody to speak up to every comment before them or what?
I think what's helpful, some folks have said, I agree with what that person said about whatever it was, that like, I agree that we need 12-foot sidewalks. And then you don't have to say the whole 12-foot sidewalk, like if there was a more longer rationale for it. That's helpful. And then I'm just writing that down. Teachers also taking notes as well. So we were trying to take some notes that you all can see, as well as notes that Chitra is taking. So
the disadvantage of that system is that, of course, the last person going to have the least support, right? Because they speak last.
It's true. It's true. So if we get to the end and somebody has support, you have support for something perhaps that someone else said, maybe we can do another round. Another thing we could do is, we can post these comments too, and so that you could, if you had a comment that somebody else supported, we could give a time period for you to just like indicate, yeah, I supported that person's comment on that alternative. Does that sound maybe reasonable as well? Because I know, again, we can only do so much in the moment right now, and then we can have some ways to communicate afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would just basically like to, since we're supposed to add only the ones that have a consensus, that there should be a way for people to express those consensus, right?
Yeah, maybe we can do something. I have some ideas actually now based on what you just said. We could do something where we're gathering everything now and have a way for you to kind of, and not quite like, but somehow kind of, say yes to that person's comment on that idea.
If this was in person, we'd have our little colored sticky notes. But
I know, exactly, right? So we're adapting. So thank you for that suggestion, Waldeck. And then we can adapt something this week and get it out maybe early next week to everyone. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
That's good. I'm really glad we came up with a way to provide that.
Yeah, let me just write that down in this little note. Okay, that will make sense to me, and we'll get that out. Okay, so we've just been going in the same order. Hopefully that's good. I would say if someone does have a strong feeling about alternative 2, maybe we can mix it up. If anybody wants to go first and raise your hand to go on alternative 2, we invite that. Otherwise, I think we'll start with Waldeck. I think is the first or on these.
I have a question.
Yes, Gail. Gail, are you there? If you're
Hello?
speaking, Gail, we can't hear you.
Rachel, are you going to give an overview of alternative 2 the way you did for alternative 1?
Oh, yes, yes, I am. Sorry. Was somebody going to ask a question though? Okay, maybe I misheard
I'm
that.
sorry. Okay, my question is a process question. Are we going to take a straw vote tonight? Is that one of the goals?
One of the last questions, if we get to it, which we're quickly running out of time,
Okay,
is to have a to state your preference.
And are we having another meeting before the PTC meeting?
We are planning to have another meeting. It is not a decision-making meeting. It is to touch base before we head to the PTC, yes.
Okay, so this is supposed to be a decision-making meeting at the end, yes?
It is supposed to get a sense of preferences. People may not have a preference. They may say they don't like any of them. I don't know what will be the result of that. If there'll be any preference that is unified. I suspect not, but maybe we'll have some groupings of folks around different alternatives. Okay. All right. So alternative 2. So again, some similarities to alternative 1, which you'll see carried through. This particular bonus area here with the residential retail mixed use corridor along Page Mill and El Camino Real. And I think we heard, and if you want to repeat, but maybe you can just nod to it, that some folks would like to see, I think as Yunin said, perhaps this area over here have a shorter height that's closer to the single family home zones to protect that buffer zone that is currently in place and to have that maintained. So folks may want to make that comment. So this is very similar to the previous alternative. You do see here on the Cloudera parcel that there is an office building which retains the current floor area of the existing office building. It's a new building, but the idea is that the same floor area within a new building, that there'd be some retail at that corner as it's more adjacent to the Caltrain corridor. There'd be some public open spaces here. And then these green areas around, especially this kind of areas, again, where we want to have that bike and pedestrian ways through. And then you can see 2 residential buildings here, again, with that 70-foot bonus for the workforce or the affordable housing, but 50 foot and then stepping down to 40 here. And then the height limit in this area is already 35, and that height limit, or I think it's 30, would be retained, allowing up to 4plexes here on the Olive Street corridor, and then allowing duplexes where there's R1. So again, no one's forced to do it, but if someone did want to develop that as a 2-unit property, they could. You can continue to see the mixed use district here in orange. This time it has a 50-foot and then here a 40-foot height limit, again, being more proximate to the R1 right there, height limits. And in this case, the office that's existing can remain or can be rebuilt into a new building, but there's no increase in office space. So if I have, 5,000 square feet of office and I tear it down to build a residential mixed use building, I could have that 5,000 square feet of office again, but I couldn't have additional office space. You can see that in this case, the 340 Portage Cannery site is reimagined into an office building and then into residential buildings, with this dotted red line indicating that there'd be ground floor commercial and retail here, really trying to make this Portage be a little mini Main Street that has some active retail here, and then adjacent to a park parcel, and then which is next to and surrounding the creek. The Ash office building in all of these alternatives is retained here. And again, this orange area is this mixed use office district. Here, the height is limited to 40 feet. And again, this is proximate to some single family homes that are right here. And then this is 50 here, and then 40. Claire, Chitra, Jean, anything that I didn't mention that we should note here?
I wanted to clarify one thing on the 4plexes. The idea there is that on Olive, where there is contiguous ownership, that there could be consolidation of lots. So the idea is not that one of these single lots would have a 4plex, but with the consolidation of parcels.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Anything else, team, before we go to comments?
Got it.
Okay.
Can I just ask again, we are going to have another time later, longer time to go over like the ones that we have chosen as our favorites. Is that correct? Or and this is just a brief go around?
Okay, so we only have till 8:30. It's 7 o'clock now. So we have these two alternatives to go through, which we're hoping to get through, and we're hoping to do all three alternatives in 90 minutes and then have 30 minutes to talk about preferences. So that's kind of elapsing at this moment, but we will try to preserve that time at the end to talk about what folks' preferred options are. So again, that's why we're trying to keep so strict on time.
Okay, so shall we get started? Maybe I'll just go in reverse order now that on my list for our speakers. So maybe Yunnan, do you want to go first for comments?
I like this one. It has more open space, but and the same concern as the first one, the high density building close to the residents along El Camino and the Page Mill. The one thing for this one, I would rather to for the building on the Cloudera site, I would rather only keep one building this along the Page Mill, but make the green space bigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. So Kirsten, you're next.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I'm not used to the new order. Okay, so I like this plan quite a lot. The monitor roof, if it's retained on the existing new building, will create a powerful sense of place, especially combined with the park. I could accept this if the bulk of the monitored building is retained for this purpose. I would like this plan very much. This plan is still under parked as far as open space, but does not feel so. I think it's very acceptable. I think all of this open space is very much needed. I might like to add in some of those little round green dots that you had on Plan 3 for the number of residents contemplated. Step down on the buildings near 395 should also step down towards Ash as it moves that direction. And this option should have a WUNERF, my new word for my new vocabulary word, on Portage and also between Portage and Acacia in that little cut through to the west of the new office building. And that's all my comments. I have one question. Can we require underground parking on new buildings? So require new buildings to all be self-parked?
I think we typically do require buildings to be self-parked, but it may not always be underground.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Great. So Keith, you're up next.
Okay, same comments as last time. I don't like the tall buildings. You need a step down there by Olive and Pepper, so make those buildings much smaller. And I agree with Kirsten about the step down on the yellow buildings as they go towards Ash. Those both all have to be stepped down. Still not enough parks. We're putting a lot of people here and they need the parks. Let's see, the new office, if that would be the resident serving like dentists and things like that, I'm fine. If it's tech offices, no, we are short of housing, then we should just put housing in that. And again, we should sunset all the offices in here. This eventually should be a residential neighborhood. So in the long term, we should be getting rid of the offices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Heather.
So I really like the sort of main street that they're trying to create here with on Portage. I like that one a lot. I do agree that the blue office space that's kind of in the center there feels just a little odd given all the residential stuff around it. I don't mind the high rises on El Camino, but I agree the sort of L-shaped one might be better used somewhere else. And I echo the other comments that it would be ideal to have some more park space, but understand the complications of that.
Great, thank you. And sorry, when you said this, you said the building that here on El Camino and Page Mill would be too tall. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I capture what you just said, right?
Yeah, I was just saying sort of that L where it goes down. Is that Olive or?
Yeah, this is Pepper here.
Yeah, so just the part in El Camino I think is good, and I can sort of see why having it go past El Camino is a little problematic.
Oh, okay, I see, got it, thank you.
Okay, great. So next is Gail.
Okay, thank you. I would say the whole issue of the location of the tall buildings, the report continually says, near El Camino and Page Mill. Primarily, I agree, but I think there are exceptions depending on the overall site plan of the NVCAP area. My concern about this is, again, it limits kind of the office and retail components. And development is a source of funds for the Affordable Housing Fund unless we create dedicated housing in some funding in some other way. So the more we compress and blunt opportunities, we're also making it very hard to do affordable housing. I do think the community benefits of this one are a tiny bit better. I question the sort of economic feasibility and the balance between these, the intensity of the uses, and we do not have enough housing. We have a housing shortage. It's critical.
Time.
It's getting worse.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Doria, you're up.
Thank you. Many of my problems with this plan are the same as the ones before. I think a much better place for tall housing is in the back of the project along Park. And I agree with Keith and others that we need to retain retention transitional height zones between low density residential uses and commercial uses to be successful in any way. And I have a question about these little areas along Olive and Pepper that are called landscape setbacks. Those currently show as being cut into those single family home residential lots. How does the staff envision that happening?
These are at the edge of these parcels.
That's not
the
way
front
they're shown.
parcels.
When you blow the map up, they're not shown that way. If you blow the map up really big, those areas cut through buildings even. So
do you want to speak to that, Jean?
Maybe it's a problem with the map.
It may just be unintentional. These are intended to be diagrammatic.
Okay.
We're not proposing to take over existing.
And do those count in any way as open space or park?
Jean, do you want to say what the parkland, the open space calculation includes?
So not necessarily, in general, we've done takeoffs to make assumptions about the park. So in this case, we've included the new park on the 395 Page Mill in the actual park calculations, as well as the park further down Park Boulevard at Portage. In general, we've just assumed that about 5% of other sites may be publicly accessible open space. But in this case, that's not going to be a publicly accessible open space. It's really just a landscape setback.
Yeah, we already have setback. So I'm wondering if that is giving us false sense of something to the public. And I also wanted to point out that in any case, in any scenario, the city is going to have to acquire land unless they are given land to build parks. So the potential for parks is virtually the same across the plans, with the exception maybe of how we, because we would always have to purchase it. So and I think that to speak to the broader issue here, we're trying to create a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, a housing. We're kind of trying to restore this to that pattern. And I think adding office is going backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So Alex, you're next.
Hi, okay. I guess I have a question for staff about the height bonus for 100% affordable or workforce housing. But my understanding is that a lot of other cities, say like San Francisco, Berkeley, Mountain View, they allow those height increases for projects that only have like 15 to 20% affordable inclusionary housing. And so this seems very different to me, and I would just like more information on how you guys got to the 100% requirement.
Right. Yeah, and I won't spend a bunch of time talking about that now, but that is one thing we are also going to be looking at. But part of it was kind of thinking about building in some ways on our HIP program to try to provide, continue to enhance that, so that if a affordable housing developer did acquire that and purchase that, they would be able to have more affordable housing on that site. And then also similarly looking at some information regarding some workforce housing developers who have been able to make good progress in developing even in the Bay Area. But we certainly can provide some comparison information to other neighboring jurisdictions and their bonus programs.
Great, thank you. And just one follow-up comment is that I think a lot of 100% affordable projects, they usually try to avoid having ground floor retail because it sort of complicates their financing. And so it seems to me if you're trying to do all of that on El Camino, we may not get the the active ground floor use. So I would just say pay attention to that. And also they often can't afford to do underground parking. So you have to try to figure out a way of doing reduced parking and or podium parking. So thanks.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Angela.
Yes, thank you. So I also like the retail on Portage, and I love the idea of Portage as a kind of main street, but especially or only actually if it's a Wooner, if it's not used for cars or rarely used for cars. So if there's some way of doing that, I would think it would be even better. Retail loves pedestrians. I also am really concerned about the lack of park space. There's only 3.6 acres, and with the number of residents, there should be 11.3 acres if we're to follow the comp plan. And I do have a suggestion. I like the idea of where the dormitory is, which you can't see right now because of there's something there. Yeah. Just above it and just to the right of it, I guess to the east and to the south, those two pieces of land, if the city council can figure out how to meet their comp plan by buying some parkland, as Doria said, those would be perfect places for some parkland. I also agree with
Time.
Sorry. Okay, I have to stop now.
Okay, thank you, Angela.
Oops.
All right, Terry.
Okay, this plan, I like some aspects of it. I think the additional park space is absolutely necessary. I agree we need a better way of adding more parkland. I was concerned about some of the buffer areas around Olive and Pepper, but as you explained, those parcels aren't really cut off, although they appear to be cut off. I guess my concerns would be the additional office space. I think if there's one thing that's very clear, one thing I'd like to think all of us are pretty clear on is that we really don't want more office space in this area. We already have a huge deficit of jobs to housing, and adding more jobs to this area is not a way to go. One final thing really quickly is demolition. The demolition of the cannery building has never really been discussed in any of our meetings, or how that would be conducted, or no feasibility studies have been presented to us.
Time.
So I am concerned about this very much.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you're next.
Thank you. Just wanted to comment on the Sobrato parcels on 340 Portage, the way they're represented. The parkland that you are indicating is somewhat suggesting that you're making a choice of affordable housing or parkland over affordable housing by suggesting if the site was redeveloped and contributing about a third of its property for a park for the lower amount of residential units that the existing building would be removed to build. So I'm not sure it's a obtainable combination on a single developer's ownership. Thank you.
Thank you. Waldeck.
Yeah, so for once, I was sorry to be the last on the list. I would start from the fact that we're not supposed to go through the list of our preferences every time around, right? We're supposed to create 3 alternative schemes, and therefore they should be different. Otherwise, it's just pointless, right? We just keep repeating the same thing over 3 times. So that's why I would say that all the comments, like we're going through the low-hanging fruit on the what we want to have, more parks, lower buildings. I mean, we just keep stressing the thing. We're supposed to have one alternative that is low development, another alternative which is more density development. So therefore, we should keep our comments for lower development to that scheme, and then for higher development to the other schemes. Specifically to this one, my comment is just that kind of along the lines with what Tim just said, is that we kind of limiting some lots low too much. And for example, I'm looking at this thing, and what I don't like it's that we are making that requirement for parking full length of that along the R1. I would say that should be kind of left to the people who are going to be designing this down the road, how they achieve our criteria, not forcing them to be at grade parking. And because this is a higher development scheme, we should allow certain compromises. And sure enough, if somebody doesn't like to have tall buildings next to the lower ones, it means we're going to build less. Therefore, vote for scheme 1. If you like to have more units, then alternative is we have those high buildings and therefore vote for scheme 2, but we should keep them separate.
Thank you, Waldeck. Okay. So it's 7:15, so we're going to go all to alternative 3. Thank you all again. I know this is not ideal in some ways, but I do thank you all for your comments, and thank you, Waldeck, for your thoughts on trying to focus on how to accentuate each alternative in its own kind of lane with which it's in. So we'll move to alternative 3. And so this is very similar to alternative 2. What you'll see that the biggest difference that then leads to some of the changes in the building's shapes or kind of the shaded areas is allowing additional office space. So you'll see that the Cloudera building is a little bit bigger. These housing buildings are a little bit smaller. The open space, I think, is a little elongated here. And again, that's to try to incentivize the development to occur by allowing those owners and operators of workplaces to have more workspace, more office space, and then hoping to get that housing to get built. And that would be tied together. You can't get the office or the office without building the housing. So that'd be a kind of a package deal. You still see the border here on ECR. You see a difference is allowing duplexes here on Olive and Pepper Streets, and then on this part of Olive, allowing up to 6 plexes. And so you may recall we talked a little bit about what could be some designs of 4 to 6 plex kind of housing that would look like a house in its design, but kind of blend in there. You can see the mixed office district is still here with the same heights, again, with big difference being allowing more office space in those buildings, but again, having housing as well. And then the 340 Portage site, we have, again, an office building that has expanded office area. And so you see the housing buildings here, again, retaining the 50-foot height limit. One thing I don't think I quite pointed out is these little green little circles here are meant to be kind of corner plazas of these buildings, again, trying to enhance the open space, the gathering space that's here along the street, again, with these retailers ideally located here. And again, the park land built out along Creek. And then I think, Dory, to address your question, I know it's not shaded a color, but allowing redevelopment of these parcels, and this is in the other ones as well, to a multifamily residential. And so that could be something that is allowed here. Again, team, anything that I'm missing that we want to point out about this option? That's important to know.
Why is the retail sort of drawn as a separate thing in front of the office building?
It's just graphical. It's supposed to be part of the building, but we're just trying to show that the ground floor is different here. It's
Rachel,
just a
to your
design thing.
sorry, to your comment about the train side of Park Boulevard, did you calculate any numbers? Did you calculate in your calculations, like in the tables on page 12, et cetera, did you calculate the number of units that could be achieved there? Because I think that area has the most potential, much more so than El Camino, because of the problems with the shallow lots on El Camino.
Jean, do you want to answer that?
So some of those sites on the east side of Park Boulevard show up in our, if we scroll up a little bit on the mural board, show up in our tier 1 sites. So yeah, hypothetically, we included them in the realistic development potential in alternatives 2 and 3.
But not in alternative 1?
Well, in alternative 1, we assumed that that area, let's just scroll back to alternative 1, that would stay as office light industrial.
Yeah, I don't see the value in that at all for what we're trying to achieve here.
But there's a proposed site already at 3241 Park on this location of potential.
I think you cut out, Kirsten.
Oh, well, it's just there's already it shows there being approved projects, potential projects already.
Right, which is another reason why I think it wasn't necessarily included in all the calculations. So,
well, to Keith's point about sunsetting some of these uses that we don't particularly want in this area anymore, and knowing that that is where you could have extended heights that wouldn't negatively impact people, I think we're not taking that area seriously enough for rezoning.
Okay, so why don't we go to, so first I'll just ask again, Chitra, Jean, Clara, anything you want to add about alternative 3 that I didn't mention?
You got it.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so Dory, we'll start with you just because I think you made a comment, which is to include more higher buildings on the
if you want
train side of Park.
Yes, if you want higher buildings, that is a place where it won't have negative impacts on existing and future residents. And I just wanted to say my observations about this are going to be pretty much the same as the last one. But I will say that I think that the data provided, such as the table 1 and 2, the metrics on page 7, and some of the other data in the spreadsheet, the key elements in the alternative, I think we're making a lot of assumptions, and I'll tell you why. Council, there's 2 things, I'll try to be really brief, but council just got a whole new study about how to get more housing, and what really pencils out is small units. And we haven't had the discussion that we need to have about dwelling units per acre as a understanding that we're going to not care as much about the dwelling units inside the building as long as the impacts of the building are mitigated for. And there's also this assumption about office. And I want to point out that there was a project that was just proposed very close, right across the street at Hanson Way in El Camino, in the research park. It had a prelim, and it grossly exceeded. It was asking for more than 2.0 FAR over what's allowed there. And it was also based on an office getting you to, much more office getting you, square footage getting you to housing. And as quickly as the council showed interest in that, the applicant walked away and is no longer doing that. So I think we're making a lot of assumptions that we shouldn't be making. And I think there's a lot of financial unpredictability, and there's a lot of other reasons why people want to build or not build. I think what we need to do is concentrate on making a place where new residents will want to live, and where existing residents won't find that their neighborhood was being sacrificed for that. So I'll just leave it at that because I don't find the, in general, this to be very different in, you know, the specificity of the plan from the previous one. But I was afraid that we're not going to get to make these big picture comments tonight. So that's where I'm at.
Great, thank you. Who's next?
Gail?
Yep. Okay. Let's see, wait a minute. Okay. I like this alternative. I still think it's a little bit modest to some degree because we continually go back to the issue of the 50-foot height limit. There's a couple of exceptions in terms of density bonuses. And we have studied this for a long time and we can't create land. We've got to be more creative with the opportunities before us. And I find that it's very frustrating. I agree on the issue of the to look at FAR and transition like they do in Mountain View to address this issue, which is one that keeps coming up. This has greater community benefits. It's economically more feasible. It's probably, you know, it really tries to develop the area in a way that provides vitality and sustainability and would work for residents nearby, residents here, commuters, and we're right near transit. I mean, there are lots of ways this can complement California Avenue and El Camino very well. I still think the unit yield, the residential unit yield is not where it should be. And in our concluding comments, I will make comments about what I think it should be. I think this is better, but I look again at the economic feasibility and trying to create a village that has vitality and diversity and a variety of
thank you, Gail. I just want to make sure we can keep on time.
Housing for a variety of incomes.
Okay, who's next?
Okay, great. How about Terry?
Okay, as you can guess, I do not like this alternative. I think it puts too much pressure. I mean, it adds more offices is what I try to say. It adds more offices to the area. And that's, of course, not what we're trying to do. That's my primary concern. I guess also, I feel like, you know, we're trying to, yes, create housing. That's true. But really for those people who need it the most, the below market rate people. And we should really be focusing in those areas. Market rate housing is not what we need. As every survey shows, the city is basically meeting those demands or close to it. Our focus should really be on those people that need the housing the most. And I'd like to see a more emphasis on that. So, and as far as offices, no more offices, period.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about Kirsten?
Okay, I like the little mini parks, the mini plaza parks. The single family residences, they're off the map area, but there are single family residences next to Griffin Music, and you haven't indicated any setbacks for them. Read my lips, no more offices. This option is unacceptable because of the data on table 2 on page 7 of the packet. It creates 220 more jobs, which would need 580 units of housing. And we are already underhoused for our jobs. What would make it acceptable would be mitigations efforts that would acknowledge that in burdening one neighborhood of Palo Alto with this intense and dense development, there's also a need to provide benefits to present and future inhabitants. So this could be done through an assessment district, as mentioned in the packet, but the rest of the city maybe should pitch in and sort of purchase this density for us by providing the mitigation. Okay.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you. How about Waldeck?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so again, I think we are missing the point. We should be concentrating on finding differences rather than trying to make all of them the same, right? So if there is something that eliminates the scheme for you, but it is a minor thing that kind of goes along the same idea, then it's worth to bring it up. Otherwise, you're just gonna make one scheme, which doesn't make any sense. So as far as I'm concerned, this scheme, it's supposed to be high density scheme. Therefore, yes, for everybody who likes the low density schemes, you're not gonna like it, and that's okay. You have a first scheme to improve and make it as reasonable as possible. What I don't like about this particular scheme is that if we going for 3 in a scale, this one should maximize the density of the whole site. So therefore, I don't see the point of leaving again the middle of the site undeveloped along the Olive Avenue. I think if it's important to leave Olive Avenue residential R1, then we should select the scheme 1. But if we like to have scheme 3, then this area should be redeveloped as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yunnan?
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I was just zooming in to try to read this little tiny writing.
So Yunnan?
So I actually I kind of agree what I said before. So I feel the alternative 3 it's not much difference compared to 2. It increased more buildings but less park. So I would think if we want to increase density, we can still keep the park, but maybe increase the height of the building. For example, the orange one, which is not close to any of the residential. And also it's along the main retail space we want to put along with this Portage Road, right?
Thank you.
And I do feel that all these alternative, all these 3 plans, they are based on the same schema. So I don't see a lot of difference.
Thank you.
Alex?
Okay, I have a question about the proposed 6-plex zoning for Olive Avenue. It seems to me that I'd like to see what you're thinking about, because it seems to me that the like between like accessibility requirements and Palo Alto's elevator requirement, that it might be very expensive to make those accessible. So I would like to see that. My second comment is on the mixed district with like the 50-foot height limit, and there's a note about like an extra 5 feet of height bonus. I just want to mention that I think most cities, like San Francisco used to do it, Emeryville does it, Berkeley does it, I think Santa Monica does it, so that the total is like 55 feet high with when there's ground floor retail. And I think they've learned that if you try to do the retail within 50 feet, that the ceiling heights are too low and you don't actually get good tenants. Like a lot of times vacant. And that's all that I have.
Okay.
Hey, Tim?
Hey, yes. Hi, Claire.
Oh, hello. Hi. Are you ready to share your thoughts?
Yes, I would say I want to put a little more context to some of the densities that are here. And I don't know how many people have been following the impacts of COVID, but the rental apartment rates for market rate units are at least down by 15 to 18%. The vacancies have all been dropping. And the reason for bringing that up is the context of rental apartments paying for extra other things such as affordable units within that project or paying for substantial parkland on the same parcel is going to be difficult for a long time. And just setting the stage that it's going to be a while before the economics come back that way, whereas the lower density ownership kinds of opportunities do provide for enough returns to build them and provide for substantial affordable units within that for ownership. So I know it doesn't touch everything, but I thought the economics of where things are going to be going for a while should be put out for us to be thinking about as we're looking at this plan and setting expectations of when the economics might actually support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Keith.
Tim, sorry, Tim, can you just, to summarize that, the economics of the rental, the housing market would support or would not support? I know, I'm sorry, I didn't capture every.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The economics of rental right now have been substantially negatively impacted. And when you drop 50 feet or so onto the types of product you're talking about, more than likely it's not going to support ownership. There's too many litigious reasons to and funding reasons to do flats in a tower in this environment, whereas rental would get you the density, but you wouldn't get it economically for quite a while under the current economic impacts.
Great, thank you.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, so Keith, are you ready?
Yep. Okay, I agree. Everything Kirsten said, especially no more offices. This is a residential area. We really need the office. We really need the residences, and we should concentrate on that. Second thing is we need more parks. We're adding a lot of people here. This set needs a lot more parks than this. I agree with Doria about the height by the railroad. That's a very good spot to put height. I also agree with Terry about, we need BMR. The workforce housing is fine, but we need BMR, and none of these options have any real BMR. And finally, the planning here seems to be a lot of hope. We're throwing a lot of people in here. We have no idea whether there'll be traffic impacts. We're just hoping the traffic will work out. We're down to 1 parking spot per unit and just hoping that the parking will work out. We need some analysis to back this up, and I'd love to get rid of parking, but I've seen no evidence that being this close to Caltrain is going to cut car ownership. People may take the train, but they're still going to own the car and they still will need to park it. And you're just moving that out to the city streets, which makes it harder for bikes to go and other neighbors to park. It's just a lot of hope, a lot of hope.
Great. Thank you, Keith.
Heather?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Yunan said about this one in comparison to the others. I also echo what people are saying about no more extra office space. I agree with that. And I also want to agree with the comments about BMR. I think that's important and not being reflected here. And more parks as well. I think that was another important point.
Thank you. So Angela, you're wrapping it up on this one.
Hey, well, I agree with much of what Heather just said, which is that we agree with Terry that affordable housing is necessary, and we need to make sure that the city council hears about the many different ways of doing it that don't involve just taking the money from extra apartments and things. And I agree with Kirsten that there's too much office space in this. I agree with Doria that near the railroad is a good place for height. I completely agree with Keith that we need much more park space if we're going to have this many people. And I think it's just too dense. So yeah, it's just too dense overall.
Great.
So I think that's everyone. And I don't know if you're planning to do a short break, Rachel.
Yeah, so it's 7:37. Do folks want to take a 5-minute break and come back to talk about their preferred alternative? It's the only one person shaking their head. Nobody else is doing anything. So I don't know what that means. Kirsten could do either way. Anybody need a break?
I would go straight to just
Okay.
finish it off.
All right, so we're gonna power through. If you need a break, feel free to turn your camera off and take a break, and we'll hopefully see you back here. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen again. Actually, I guess maybe I don't need to share it. So I think what we wanted to do now, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, sorry to keep flashing back and forth, is to just hear from everybody if they have a preferred alternative. I mean, to some degree, via the comments that everyone made, I think at least I can venture guesses on folks what their preferred alternative would be. And so just to see where the working group is, what I'll do is just take notes, and then we can show at the end where folks are with their preferences. And again, we have from now until 8:15 for this discussion topic about preferred alternatives. And if you have a question for someone else about why they prefer it, or you want to try to persuade them to your alternative, we'll just kind of see where everybody is at this moment. So we can just do a quick round, not like a minute, but just like if everybody can just say what their alternative is, we just get that out there, what your preference is, and then we'll have some more time for kind of back and forth discussion on that. Does that sound okay? Just kind of get it out there on the table, and then we'll have be able to talk back and forth a little bit more, hopefully. All right, so I will assume that is okay by no one saying that it's not okay. All right, so Chitra, can you help to run through the group and to say who can just go around?
Okay, so are we going to start? So we are going to start with Waldeck first then?
Whoever you're calling. I can't see
Sure.
the screen right now because I'm looking at the board. So you can manage it however you like.
Okay. I am calling on Waldeck first.
Sure. So I'm actually sorry we didn't start with this, because we might just have it as thing over with. Everybody would just express their opinion and then concentrate on actually differences between them. So my personal one is preference is on the second one. I think kind of balances the development, the need for development the best. But I think that it is good to have three clear alternatives. So basically for others who are going to make a decision, to have a full spectrum to select from. And I disagree that all the parameters need to be the same just because we like it that way, right? We should be showing basically what consequences come with the level of development. So if we are making something denser, then that allows us to have more parks. And if we make something looser, then we cover more territory, we have less parks. And then we can choose whichever works for us in particular. And
Okay, so I'm
my
just going to
choice
stop you. I
is
just
the
want to stop
second.
you there. Number 2. Okay, so but I do want to, hopefully we can get to some of that richness from everybody. Who's next?
Okay, Alex, you're next.
Alex, do you have a preferred alternative?
Yeah, I do not have a preferred alternative. I have a lot of questions about all three schemes and how viable they are. And I did watch the recent council hearing on the feasibility of different housing types and affordability requirements. And so I still have a lot of questions in my mind. I think my goal would be to try to get as many housing units in as possible, as well as maximizing the park space.
Great.
Next is Angela.
So this is just a quick go round for just our number,
That
right?
is what it's trying to be, yes.
Because we'll have more time to speak later. So 2 for me.
Okay, thank you.
Doria, you are next. Doria?
Sorry, I didn't unmute. I agree with Alex that there's too many questions for me to choose one, but there are good aspects to all of them.
Great.
Gail, you are next.
Okay, I like alternative 3. I think it has the most promise and it provides the best opportunity. I do think the number of housing units should be higher. I think we should be talking in the range of 2,300 to 3,200. And this is a plan for the year for 5 to 25 years. So we should be much bolder in our planning effort.
Okay, great.
Next
Thank
is
you.
Heather.
Alternative 2.
Thank you.
Next is Keith.
Well, if I can't make any modifications, I don't like any of them, but if I can make my modifications that are requested, like adding parks and having more step downs and stuff, then I think alternative 2 is probably the best starting spot.
Okay, great.
Next is Kristen.
Alternative 2 with a strong advocacy for retaining the historic placemaking elements.
Okay.
Terry, you are next.
Okay, a simple answer is 1.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
Tim, you're next.
I'm going to have to say 1 only because I, as a developer, think of things in practicalities and potential actually getting built. I do think it could be a combination of all 3, reorientating different pieces as they're developed out. But if you may ask me to pick 1 off the shelf, I'd have to go the first.
Okay. Next is Yunan.
Sorry, I just came back. So are we voting now or just rounds of opinion?
Everyone's just saying what their preferred number, their preferred alternative was.
Okay, so if we cannot make any modification, if I have to make 1, I'll vote for 1.
Okay.
I think I have asked everybody. Did I leave anybody out? The screens change. So, okay, I think we went through that.
I think that is everybody.
Yeah,
got everybody.
Oh no,
Okay.
Walden, did I? Oh,
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, we did. He was
yes,
first.
Yes, yeah. He was
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 people who said alternative 2.
Mhm.
1, 2, 3. 3 who said alternative 1. 1 person who said alternative 3. And then 2 with no preference. So maybe what we can do is hear from the alternative 2 folks first, since there were just a majority there. Some of the comments from those who said alternative 2 were Waldeck that it was a balance of the different needs. Keith did want to add more parks to it. He might have said something else, Keith, and I'm sorry if I forgot what else you said. Kirsten with an emphasis on maintaining some of the historic elements like the monitor roof as part of the placemaking of alternative number 2. So for those whose preference is alternative 2, perhaps you want to talk together about some elements you'd want to keep or some of those things you'd like to see adjusted. And if it's helpful, I can share the screen with the diagram. Just let me know if that's helpful.
Any particular order?
No, just as you have ideas or comments, raise your hand digitally or in real life if you can't find your little blue hand. And share what you if you would make. I know someone said they would like to make some changes. What changes they might like to make to that one?
Yeah. So my personal take on it is that yes, we do have alternative 1 that kind of respects both the historical aspect of the site and also kind of tries to keep the very little contrast between the buildings along El Camino and the buildings behind. This one should be low boulder and should allow for more development. So I kind of like it the way it is set up right now. The only thing that I would like to change is that parking that is between the Fry's building and buildings on Olive. I don't think we have to keep it as a parking. I would like to give developers more flexibility on how they want to develop this whole area altogether.
So making sure that parking lot is also zoned to have an option for housing or something. And if it stays parking, okay, but that it wouldn't be required to stay parking.
Yes, give them more flexibility. And one more thing, because it came with the previous comments on the podium parking along the El Camino. I think that that will be a mistake, because El Camino should have the presence for retail at the ground level. And whichever way we go with the parking, and I realize that there are some problems, we should still insist on having the retail at the ground level.
Okay, so having active ground floors on El Camino really important, and allowing the parking lot to become something else besides a parking lot if it's desired in the future. Anybody who's a fan of alternative 2, do we support those ideas to incorporate those?
I think that there is some value to, again, when one walks through a city and one sees a bit of the history of the city, that is one of the things that creates place. And seeing the railroad tracks and this parking area would allow you to sort of have the history of the railroad tracks visible, is of value to me. I realize that might not be of value to everyone. A lot of people like everything to look brand new and scraped, but I like when there's some history in the space that you're inhabiting.
Is that to say keeping the surface parking lot a surface parking lot? Is that what you're saying? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
because it would allow you to retain the look of the original railroad tracks. You could preserve that and
Okay.
park over it.
But we kind of have it already in scheme 1, right?
Well, I like scheme 2 because it adds a lot of density and allows the ability to add many, many more housing units than scheme 1, but it still allows there to be a hybrid. So I understand that you don't want to do that, but it's okay for me to say that I do want to do that.
Great. Other comments, feedback on alternative 1, or responses to Waldeck or Kirsten's comments?
Yeah, I really like what Kirsten said about placemaking and how, although I'm not as concerned about the railroad spur as I am about the monitor roofs. I think that we can use the monitor roofs really well. I like the suggestion that you put into all the alternatives, the descriptions of the alternatives, especially, I'm not sure if it's possible, but if we can keep them at the same height that they are now, especially if you're looking at the entrance or near the Ash and Lambert, if you ride your bike there or walk there or drive there, I guess, and you look towards the monitor roofs, they're like framed. It's wonderful. It's a very nice way of placemaking, a really good image there. So I like the idea of creating that sense of place just by using the roofs themselves. And I'm not as concerned at all about the building, but the roofs give that sense of place and history, which I really like.
Yeah,
and
I like that as well. It is a nice idea. Yes.
So I'm hearing a lot of support for the roof. And Kirsten, I think you like the railroad portion of the parking lot. Maybe there's some diversity of opinion on that portion of it. But it seems like the roof is an agreed, like, nice kind of icon, if you will.
I also like, and this is true of all the plans, the way the parks line up as sort of a rhythm where there's a park that you can see on park as you ride your bike, and then another park that sort of attracts you down into the heart of the space. And
yeah, that's nice too.
And it's just not enough parks. Sorry if I get repetitive there, but yeah, we should have more park if we're going to have that many more residents.
And there's something that is an equity issue. Is I really want there to be affordable housing and workforce housing. I think both, because workforce includes the salary range that teachers and firefighters might be in. But if we're going to swallow all of the density. I mean, a lot of the comments that they want more density aren't people that live anywhere close to the study area. And I mean, close maybe a mile away, but they're not going to feel the impacts the way the residents are. And I think we have to think about, I'm all for packing density in. I like the 50-foot buildings. I like the 70-foot bonus for affordable. But I want to know that the city is going to say, okay, you're doing this for the city. I'm going to mitigate that.
In terms of the traffic?
In terms of traffic, in terms of giving us excellent parkland within a quarter acre, as mentioned in the packet. In terms of minimizing parking overflow, in terms, yeah, you name it.
I see what you're saying, yes, sorry.
In terms of giving us, yeah, group buys on solar, so that's an entirely self-sustaining energy neighborhood. You know, like, let's make it good.
I was actually concerned about the idea of putting a park mile of the NV cap rather than in the NV area. Because a quarter mile, you might have to cross El Camino to get to. And I think if we're going to, if the city's going to be buying some park space, they should do it in the NV cap, not across El Camino or on the other side of the railroad tracks. All of those are within a quarter mile, and it's not enough.
Yeah, I think part of the idea was to be able to be opportunistic, and as land becomes available for sale that is good for parkland, to be able to buy that. But if the group's not supportive, you know, we can reflect that in the planning commission report.
Well, we're reality based, but in a perfect world, not supportive, I guess.
I don't know what to write that down as. So I mean,
we realize that there are market pressures that perhaps might make this unfeasible, but we would strongly prefer that the parkland is within the NVCAP study area.
Of course, I think that's the goal. I guess part of the question would be if land is across Lambert, would we want to buy it or not? Or if I can certainly understand not across the railroad tracks, but I mean, maybe we don't. And I think that's fine to say.
It's bound on three sides. The railroad tracks are fairly impenetrable barrier. Page Mill Road is a fairly impenetrable barrier, and El Camino Real is a fairly impenetrable barrier. So if it's within a quarter mile walkable distance, I'll put it that way, a safe walkable distance by, say, a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old, you know?
Lambert would be fine, but the railroad or El Camino or or Page Mill, not fine.
Okay. Gail?
Can I ask Tim two questions related to this?
Sure.
Okay, Tim, can you review for us the market prices for 1 acre of land that's zone CS or
Okay, actually, I'm going to stop you, Gail. I want to focus on the alternatives at hand, and I would encourage you to ask Tim that, but I want to make sure we're focusing on alternative 2. I'm going to turn briefly to alternative 1 for those who liked alternative 1. So if anybody has more comments on alternative 2, who that was your preferred alternative, I want to hear that, because we need to go to alternative 1 and then back, and we have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, all
20
right.
minutes
I
left.
feel it is relevant because people keep talking about parkland, but go ahead. I agree, we're running out of time.
I just want to say I like the idea of ADUs and fourplexes on Olive. That's all.
Thanks. Any other comments on that idea? For, against, okay? That.
Yeah, I think ADUs on Olive are a good thing.
So ADUs are already allowed, so that wouldn't be a change. They just are already allowed. So I think this particular one was suggesting they could be up to 4 units on Olive.
Yeah, is that with those small lots? I'm not sure if 4 is a good answer. Isn't it better to keep it R1 and have ADUs? I mean, that.
I suppose it just depends on what you're trying to achieve in terms of, is it better? So 4 would obviously have, more units overall, but, it really would depend on the goal you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and the one nice thing about ADUs is that they do give good low-income housing. as
They tend to
opposed
be more affordable, but we don't actually know what the rates are. They're not controlled. So
Yeah.
we do tend to think of it as more naturally affordable than a house, but we don't have good data on if that's actually bearing out. Jean, did you want to speak?
I guess my comment would be we should consider it. I wouldn't say that we have to have ADUs in R1, but I think that's a consideration to what's the better option if we're getting housing there.
Legal.
It's already allowed now. We don't have to allow it or not allow it. It's already allowed.
No, but I'm saying is we're talking about changing it to a fourplex, and I'm saying, well, maybe we should consider keeping it R1, and with ADUs, that may be a better option for getting affordable housing than having fourplexes.
I see what you're saying. Okay, got it.
Maybe add the word encourage ADUs and leave it R1.
Any thoughts on that? Others who favored alternative 2? Having that be R1 with ADUs encouraged?
Well, actually, if fourplexes are allowed, are you going to allow them to combine lots to create a fourplex? Because then you're actually doing less than R1 with an ADU and a J ADU.
Jean, do you want to talk about the typology for those sites briefly?
Sure. So there's a few different things that could happen here. Yes, you're correct. If you consolidated 4 lots and only ended up with 4 units, you would not be better off than you are today if your goal is to increase the unit size. But if we can get to that 10,000 square foot lot, then you could do some attached townhomes or even some stacked flats. And so that's where you'd have a little bit more density. And now under state law, there are even some provisions to add an ADU or a JADU to a junior ADU to a multifamily building. So you could even add a couple more. But we have some prototypes for what that sort of 10,000 square foot lot can get you in terms of a little bit more density.
So, okay. I have one more comment, which I actually didn't bring this thing sooner because it was expressed in the circulation diagram improvements, but it's not obvious looking at this plan that we do have more pedestrian connections going from south to north. Because here, especially like with this parking lot kind of cutting through it, it seems like basically we have a south side and we have a north side, and the things are totally separated. And I think that is a set development.
Yeah. I think what we would try to do is we would try to be, if any sites here did redevelop, and especially in this section, there's quite a few rental homes. If they were ever redeveloped, try to get an easement for a bike and pedestrian connection across a parcel in this area, but it's something that we can't guarantee would happen. We just have to see if the property owners were willing to do that at a point in the future. So
can we put this thing that is a desired thing to have? And
yes, we do have it noted as
it.
We do have it noted that there's a desire to try to get some connection in this area. Yeah, because I agree with you. It is kind of like there's this side of the area and then there's this side, right? And it's very bifurcated because of that.
What happened to the idea of cottage courts?
That would be, I think, in the fourplexes could be that in terms of the style, right? And then I think in the first alternative that was included. I don't want that.
I have a couple comments.
Yes, Doria?
Yes. So one is, I just, when you read about alternative 2 on page 5, it says, assume significant demolition of cannery building with retention of the monitor roofs, either incorporated into a new building or relocated on site in a new feature. I question how feasible that sentence is. I just wanted to get that out there because especially if you're going to put a much taller building than is there right now, that just doesn't seem very feasible to me. And the other thing I want to point it out is when you, if you allow, yes, SB 330 does have some protections for displacement, but one thing it doesn't do is in any way guarantee that the people that are displaced can afford the new housing. So understand that any upzoning is likely going to result in displacement because people, you can give them first right of refusal, but if they can't afford it and they can't come back. And they also have to, so it's to me, it's not a golden pill. And that being said, I know that you can never redevelop anything without displacing someone. So, but I just want to point out those two things, which kind of go across a couple of the.
Yeah, for sure.
I noticed that, I mean, Doria, I think you make a great point, and that is something I wanted to bring up too, is this whole idea of displacement. And it seemed to me that there was a section, I can't remember what page it was on, that
12.
described
It's on 12.
how not only right of refusal, what page?
12.
Page 12, not only right of refusal, but also that the rate of the rental rate would be protected under certain circumstances. And I was wondering if we could extend that protection to all of the people who are currently renting there, so that it's not just this rarefied few who get that kind of rental protection. But I would like to see it extended to all the people who are renting there, because I hate to see anyone displaced.
But Angela, so how this thing makes difference for all other renting people in Palo Alto? Why we are not protecting them? Why suddenly those few houses in this area are more protected than anybody else in Palo Alto?
That, Waldeck, is a conversation that is beyond the scope of this meeting. It is a good one that I would encourage you and Angela to have. But I think certainly we could, council and other decision makers could choose to extend it. And I think it's clear to us, at least our group is wanting to have some provisions that are extending it to the folks here. So we're going to go to alternative 1 now. There were, I think, 3 people who were supportive of alternative 1 as their preference. For those who support alternative 1, are there any other modifications you want to suggest or additions? I think a modification that I heard pretty clearly and consistently was an idea I think Union had, which is to perhaps on this more, I don't know what direction you'd say this is, the El Camino Page Mill corner near the single family homes to retain the setback height requirements, that it's 35 feet within 150 feet of single family homes, but perhaps over here in this orange area to have that actually be the higher height because it's farther from the single family homes in this kind of area with Equinox and this other kind of collection of buildings. So that's an idea that I heard and would love feedback from others on, and as well as other feedback for this alternative.
Yes,
So
I like that idea.
I don't. So I guess we just kind of go through this voting thing on it, right?
Well, I think part of it is, I mean, for folks who this was their preferred alternative, not that I don't mind Angela or Waldeck's comments on it, but would be in particular interest of those who this was their preferred option to Union's idea of kind of flip-flopping some of the height away from the single family homes.
I'd like to make some comments.
Yep, Terry?
Okay, again, I'm going to emphasize this, but I've already emphasized it so many times. I know people are sick of it, but this building that's in the heart of this NevCap area is significant for all kinds of reasons. Probably because this is the last cannery site or last cannery production facility that exists probably throughout not only Northern California, but maybe through California, period. I think that this site, for not only that reason, but for the significance of Thomas Foon Chu, who was probably the first Chinese American entrepreneur in California, that this site is worth preserving for all time. And I think that that is something that I want to make sure gets into the final report and gets to council. I think it's critical that that get in there. I also think it's critical that we never forget the residents, particularly those in Olive and Pepper, who sometimes get overlooked. And I think that these buildings that are along Park and Page Mill and El Camino, sorry, will have a significant impact on their future and on their livability and the quality of life that they live there. I think this is one of the affordable areas of Palo Alto that still exists, these homes there. And I would like to see us trying to retain them as much as possible so that they can remain affordable and useful for the people that live there. And obviously, we don't want to displace people, and that's a critical issue. And I think that my other issue, of course, is in trying to think about demolishing this building, the cannery site, as Doria pointed out, there's no feasibility structure or no feasibility
Terry, I
study
just
that
want to
says
focus you on alternative one because I
Yeah.
want to just focus on
that's
this
alternative one. That is
Right.
alternative one.
Right, and I've been saying it's not proposed to be demolished in this alternative, so I just want to say
Yeah.
that that's not part of.
Yes, but
It
this,
would be retained.
okay, but I want to repeat again, the critical nature of this building.
And I appreciate that, but what I'm trying to get to is a conversation amongst other working group members about alternative one regarding any changes that you guys would like to see as a group
I
who
think
this is their preferred alternative.
I think I already outlined those, Rachel. I
Yes.
think I already said that along Park and Grant, or
Right, and what I'm
El
trying to get now
Camino.
is for people to respond back to you in the limited time we have. We have about 5-7 minutes now, and so I just want to create space for others to respond to what you're saying about
You
this
mean the
specific
alternative one people or what?
Yes.
Okay, that's
yes,
fine.
That's what I would like to have happen.
Okay, fine.
So any other folks from alternative one to any?
I have one more thing want to add.
Yep.
So like alternative 2 and 3, we can also make some of part of the Caldera part as an open space park. So like the current garage building there, so we can change that to a park.
Part of why that's not a park is because there's not that much development happening. So if
we're not going to change anything there.
Yeah, so if they're going to keep having their office use and having their cars parked there, then they wouldn't be able to have that become a park.
Okay, got it.
That's part of that idea. That's why it's kind of not really a lot of change. Did you have any comments to Terry's comments, or again, anybody support Union's idea to flip flop the heights?
I want to say that for a scheme one, I agree with everything that Terry said.
Okay, great. Any other support or opposition to Terry's comments?
I'll jump in for a second since I'm across all. I agree that the transitional heights are very important to keep. I think you have just as much need for a park here because the whole Ventura neighborhood is already under parked. So, and we would get it the same way unless somebody gives it to us, we're gonna have to buy it. And that the west side of park should become taller housing, should be rezoned, and think of a way to sunset some of the uses there, obviously not including the Hobach building, which is already a mixed use, and not the building that was just built, to Kirsten's point, because obviously we're not going to suggest that. And yeah, that would be an improvement here. And there's no reason not to assume adding parks here. I also think that the baseline, I'll just say this, that based on the staff report and the parcel report that Chitra did, the big one, I think the baseline of what the baseline zoning could provide here has not been calculated properly. That was calculated in Measure M, but I'll leave it at, Alternative M, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, any other support for Doria's suggestion to have redevelopment of the parcels near the train track? Do folks support that? Kirsten's a yes. Anybody else?
Yeah, Keith's a yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I like it. Angela's a yes too.
Okay.
Yes, Waldeck, yes.
I have one other comment, which goes across all of them, is that we have 340 as far as current applications and pre-screenings, we have 340 Portage, 2951 El Camino, 3,300 El Camino. We also have called out on this map several other locations that have permitted properties. I won't list them all because they're the stars on this map or asterisk on this map. And I feel like unless the requests for these projects are compliant with what we're intending to do, perhaps we should ask for a freeze on new permitting until we have a preferred plan.
Great, thank you. I think it is difficult to do moratoriums right now because you can't do moratoria on that prohibits housing development, and so that would be challenging to do at this point in time. Could be on commercial development, and that's something that the city council could choose to do. Gail, you're on mute if you're talking.
Okay, properties on the east side there, does the general plan, what is the underlying zoning right there on the east side of Park?
GM.
Okay, I mean, so it's feasible to redevelop those? I mean, is that what you said earlier, just to clarify?
I didn't say anything about the feasibility. I just asked if folks were supportive of it being included as redevelopment parcels in alternative one.
Oh, well.
So I wrote down that
wanted to know
people are supportive
feasibility.
of it.
Okay, I don't know. I don't have an opinion.
Okay.
Hey, Gail.
Yep.
Oh, Gail, this is Alex. Just under the GM zone, housing is not allowed.
Oh,
But-
and this one. Yeah, okay.
But we're supposed to just say what we want, right?
Yeah, it would be rezoned to
Yeah.
to allow housing. That's the idea. And Doria, I'm sorry, you said a couple other ideas that I wanted folks to come back to. You mentioned park space, and there was something else that you mentioned that I forgot already that I wanted folks to say if they were supportive of it.
Retaining
Transitional heights, you said, and I got that one. And I got the railroad track, but was there something else you said?
The ability to get parks, assuming that we have to buy land, that no one's going to give it to us, is the same in all three scenarios. And we're already under parked, so I know this is a lower growth scenario, but it's still, there's already a deficit of parks in the Ventura neighborhood. So
yeah,
not to say we wouldn't want to add one here in the lowercase scenario. And the other thing is that I believe, based on Chitra's parcel report, that, inch big, that the potential for the existing zoning, not that we want to keep it everywhere, but the potential for the existing zoning, especially in the mixed use areas, I think was underestimated in the staff report. And that was calculated based on Chitra's parcel report in alternative M.
Okay, we can take a look at that. I think for the parkland, there is an assumption in the other alternatives of parkland dedication being required, and extending that not just to be for ownership housing, but for rental housing as well. So that's the idea, is that we would require dedication of parkland from the private development.
All parkland has to be dedicated, or it's not really.
But just to say like that it would be part of the development agreement, it wouldn't be that the city is necessarily purchasing it from the developer, that it's required to be provided as part of the development.
Oh, so I don't think that I do not buy the assumption that open space on private land that is not dedicated as parkland should be counted as park.
That's why I'm saying it would be required that the developer would dedicate it as parkland in the development
scenarios.
Yes, that's what yes, exactly. Okay, so that's why there's just less parkland featured here.
In both of the other scenarios, there was a comment saying city would have to, there were two different there was a comment in both of the other scenarios that said the city would have to acquire some land to make these things happen. So
Jean, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I think maybe this is related to, in general, we're not meeting the goal of open space. And so we're suggesting that there may be some park dedication required as part of the redevelopment of some of the larger sites. But in order to get, to the 4 acres per 1,000 residents, we'd need to find other ways, and that could include the city acquiring parcels.
So the land that's shown in the green is assumed to be dedicated. And then in addition, to meet the aspirational goal from the comp plan, we would need to purchase additional land on top of that to meet the parkland dedication or parkland goals. Okay, so it's 8:17. I don't know, do we have anybody, participants who are here who are here to give public comment, any of our attendees, if you're here to give public comment, if you can please raise your hand now. You can do that by finding the raise your hand function. It should be at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone by pressing *9. Again, raise your hand or press *9 now if you'd like to speak, so we can make sure we have time for everybody who'd like to speak. So far I have 2 raised hands. Please add yourself if you would like to speak so we don't miss you. Okay, so I want to thank working group members for their feedback and their comments. What we will do is we will send out kind of a general questionnaire that just gives you some more space to make comments, and kind of breaks it up to different topics and also just kind of a general topic so you can help to organize the feedback that comes to us. What we'll also do is kind of coalesce these comments. We'll try to keep it more towards things that we want to either enhance or change about any of the alternatives based on what your fellow working group members said. And so you can kind of maybe checkbox the things that you agree, yeah, I'd like to see that happen in this alternative. Perhaps keeping an eye and monitoring yourselves on what your preferred alternative is, which is to say, kind of as Waldeck said, maybe you don't like alternative 3 and that's okay. And so you just say, alternative 3, just let it be. I'm going to focus on the adjustments I'd like to see to my own preferred alternative and making that the best one that you think it can be versus trying to morph the others. So that relies on each of you just taking responsibility to do that and be a team in focusing on, Waldeck said, is having 3 distinct alternatives that we can present to decision makers so they have some differences to look at. I know folks, some folks also have questions. Please also, there'll be an area where you can write your questions and we'll try to get those answers to you as soon as possible. And certainly they may be questions that we want to be prepared for the PTC to be able to answer. And so that helps us to be ready too. And then of course, there's things that we just unfortunately don't know at this time. We don't know what the traffic would be because we don't have ability to study 3 different traffic scenarios with 3 different development scenarios. And so we've got to go from conceptual to a little bit more down on the ground. And as we do that, we can both afford to and have better results from the studies that we conduct, including taking a closer look at the financial feasibility of all these and getting some more numbers behind them. So we thank you so much for your participation today and for sharing your time and sharing your opinions and thoughts, and I look forward to some further refinement of these. And of course, if ever you want to just call and talk to myself or Clara Chitra and just talk through an idea, that's also an option. Sometimes writing things down can be hard. And I'll say the very last thing, we'll make this Miro board or a version of it available to you if you'd like to try Miro out, if that would be helpful. There's some tools in here where you can draw and do some things, and maybe that'd be helpful for you just as you're thinking through it, something that you could do or kind of interact a little bit. So something to try on.
Rachel?
Yep.
So you did not go through the option 3 at all, right? So do you want this thing to be written?
We did go through option 3. We've got about, well, we can do a little bit of it. I know at this, we have 3 speakers, so I want to leave them time. Gail was the only person who preferred option 3. So Gail may be able to give us her comments on changes she'd like to see. I think her biggest change was to have more housing units in it. And so I don't know if there's others who preferred option 3 who had comments to make on it.
I did not dislike it, so I would like to have a right to comment.
Okay.
I mean, what's the routine here? Because I feel that I haven't had a chance to speak to 3, and there are members of the public that want to speak. So should I just make my presentation in writing? I mean, I have some ideas about 3, and I think it's
okay. Why don't you take a minute, Gail, and just share some of your ideas about 3 and Waldeck, and we'll just try to do that in the next 2 to 3 minutes so we can get to the public commenters before too long.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead real quick. Yeah,
sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So consistent with other statements I've made about this, I really feel alternative 3 is a start in terms of an opportunity for a site that has all these assets, including the existing neighborhood right there, where you can develop something that has retail, commercial, office, open space, compact infill development, which has environmental and public health benefits, and it could be designed in a way to have real community benefits that the immediate area would enjoy. And I think the economic feasibility, There are parts of that which need to be discussed more. The issue on Pepper and Olive, in my mind, I think in my Lego presentation, I felt that the Pepper and Olive should have a range of different possibilities, you know, duplex, triplex, quadplex, and to encourage occasionally consolidation of parcels so that there's a range of opportunity. I feel very strongly that on a lot of these parcels, the orientation of the buildings, the design elements, the setbacks, all of that can make this an extremely creative and wholesome site. And I think if we just kind of move towards the middle of the road or the other part of the road where we're not doing anything particularly creative or innovative, we're not reimagining a variation in heights that will create space for housing and community benefits, I don't think we are treating this in a way that at the level that we should be. This site is a 5 to 25 year plan. In 2035, we will have 87,000 people projected in Palo Alto. And we need to build phase building of this site in order to make this manageable. These are legacy decisions affecting our colleagues, our friends, our grandkids. That's why I am pushing for this. I think the housing also needs to be, you know, very significant, as much as up to in the range of 2,300 to 3,200. We've got to really be visionary and creative. And if we're not, I personally don't think we're doing our job.
Okay. Waldeck, do you want to add something?
Yes, so I think that we should have one option that actually redevelops the portion of the Olive Avenue and the parking behind, just as one alternative to present.
Okay. Gail would agree with that based on her comments.
You're saying a range of opportunities for those corridors. Is that what you said?
I think he's specifically speaking to this parking lot area and this area here.
Yeah.
Are you just talking about the parking lot, Waldeck, or the houses
No,
as well?
Both for this schemes, for this scheme, both.
Okay.
Rachel, before we move on, or if you want to, I just wanted to give everybody an update on the timing of some future meetings. If we want to have a minute.
Do it quickly, yes.
Sure. So there's a meeting planned on November 5th with the Parks and Rec Commission. So it's going to be a joint meeting. And at that meeting, that's going to be specifically focused on the creek and the Matadero Creek renaturalization document. So we will definitely get that out to you before we have that meeting. So that meeting will be available for the consultant to come and share with you how they put everything together and what that plan or what the analysis shows for that document. So that's the next meeting that we've got scheduled. The next meeting after that is we're planning to do a pre-planning commission meeting with the working group the week of November 30th. And these are a little bit tentative, but this is what we're targeting right now. Because the following week we're targeting going to the Planning Commission on December 9th to present to them the alternatives that we've been working on. And then the idea is that that recommendation from the Planning Commission will be forwarded to Council, and we're hoping to go in early spring next year. So that's just a sort of a rundown of the meetings coming up in the immediate future.
Great, thank you, Claire. Okay, so Chitra, if you can call the public speakers, we'll have our public comment. And then, as I said, we'll look forward to having some more written correspondence with everybody and more feedback. Thank you so much. Chitra?
Okay, our first public speaker right now is YEMBI Action Staff. That's how it's said.
Sorry, I logged in from my work account unintentionally, but my name is Kelsey Baines, and I was at one of the early meetings for this group, and I have to say I'm pretty disappointed with where the process has gone and the discussion that was had today. I think this is an opportunity to do something really transformative and create a plan that is inclusive and beautiful. And I don't see that happening with this group that seems primarily focused on minimizing change. One thing of note is this is a majority renter neighborhood. And I'm curious how many renters are in this working group, or if there are any. This is important because renters actually feel the pain of the housing crisis. For us, the need for housing is existential. I have no future in this region if things don't change. And what I see playing out here is more of the same. I was really bothered by Doria Suma's comments about displacement. I think you're misinformed and you're forming people on this working group. I've lived in 3 neighborhoods in 3 years in Palo Alto, and I've been displaced twice with no upzoning. Once when my illegal multifamily housing was demolished to build a single family home because it was downzoned. And once when my rent went up 18% despite there being no building in the neighborhood. The status quo is what displaces people. Our comp plan is what displaces people because it makes sure that housing remains scarce. We need more housing. We need more housing at all income levels. It doesn't make any sense to say we only want BMR housing, because the difficulty with that is if you get a raise, you have nowhere to go, because we only have 2 kinds of housing, multi-million-dollar homes or BMR homes where you have to income qualify. So
1 minute left.
We need a range of housing types. I really wish that people could get more excited about 5 to 7 story buildings being nearby. When I lived downtown, all my favorite buildings were the 7-story buildings. They can be really beautiful. If you think about the scale of Paris, and if you walk down Forest, I think those would be nice things to have in your neighborhood. And I think if we're trying to shunt all the height and density to certain parts, that we should be considering higher heights like 12-story stacked flats so that they'll actually be feasible. I don't think we should be planning for any new R1. 87% of the residential land in the city is R1. And even though there's going to be an ADU and a JADU on an R1 lot, that provides no new opportunities for ownership. It's going to be a multi-million-dollar home. Yeah, that doesn't give me any hope for my future here if we're building more R1 lots. And I'll just say, I like the idea of a parking or of a pocket park. And I think that could be.
Thank you, Heather, or Kelsey, that's your time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next speaker is Rebecca Sanders.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. I apologize, I couldn't make it earlier. Something kept me away. You can see a picture of her. So I just want to take a little exception with the calling out of Doria Suma by the previous speaker. I don't care for that. So I'm just going to put that on record that everyone on this panel is entitled to their decision, and no one should be called out for their particular opinion. So I just trashed some of my time here. What I really wanted to say is I came late to the meeting because I had other commitments. I so enjoyed the conversation, the deliberation, how everyone was respected. Rachel, I think you did a great job moderating this. I can see all the different points of view. I am softening up a bit, but I really think you all are working hard toward getting to the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And you are including the people that live in Ventura as people that you want to consider in your choices. So I just want to applaud you for a job well done. And I guess that's all I have to say. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm totally, flipping my wig on every little thing you all discussed tonight. I disagree with a lot of what I heard, but what I heard was excellent deliberation. And I'm hoping that when this does go to other bodies, commissions and boards, that you will be treated with the respect that you deserve because of the very hard work you have done to try to come to consensus as much as possible and to voice the values that you have observed in the community around you. So thank you very much. And I really enjoyed listening tonight.
Thank you. And our
Thank
last
you.
speaker is Kevin Ma.
Hello, NVCAP members. My name is Kevin Ma, and I'm a renter in the Ventura neighborhood. As such, I would ask that the working group focus on creating the most amount of housing for all levels of our society. As we know, a lot housing crisis is still here. Evictions has just been reopened since October 5th, of which, if your landlord isn't nice enough, they'll just delay it until February when everyone can face eviction court equally. As we know recently on a KQED article is that R1 zoning does have racist roots. It actually started in Berkeley just to basically prevent Black people from living where white people were in Berkeley. So there is a racial component that remains with such exclusionary zoning. Now, I am not saying that Ventura should be the brunt of all the housing in the area. Do I think that, let's say, Old Palo Alto, College Terrace should have their of zoning purposes? Yes, but this is our best shot at trying to make at least some dent in our RENA numbers, because you see the RENA numbers progress we see so far is not that great. RENA numbers for the next cycle are going to be much larger. And also we need to make progress on our environmental goals. Ventura is near the CalAV station, and we know that we should be trying to reduce driving. We should be reducing the number of people who have to take the 2 hours, 1 hour drive from like San Benito or from Stockton just to get here. Like, there's a reason why most of our first responders don't live in the cities, because it's way too expensive given the amount of incomes we're expected to have for their jobs. Like, at this point, if things improve, we either have people who are lucky enough to have been born in this community and manage to stay here, or people who are incredibly rich, right? Lawyers, or maybe if I strike it rich with IPO, I might be able to afford a house here. But that really excludes a lot of people in our society, such as our teachers. We're like, we see Measure O explicitly added trying to retain staff this year for the parcel tax for the school district. Like a housing crisis and poverty are inextricably related in the city that we have to address at some point. Like, do I think there should be a lot of BMR housing? Yes, there should be a lot of BMR housing. But as one of the speakers have said, either we focus on it too much, we do become so income limited. Like, a person has made enough to go over BMR, it's like, oh, you're kicked out because you failed your income limits. Like, where else are they going to go? Like, they have to go somewhere. Otherwise, the society is going to become extremely stratified. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of all public speakers.
Great. Thank you to all our public speakers. Thank you all working group members for joining us. Keep an eye out for the email about the creek discussion. And then we will send out also, again, the survey and a way to respond to each other's comments tonight. But I think it's really great progress. And thank you all again for your diligence and for your careful reading of your packet. I was very impressed. So glad to know that that was put to good use. We appreciate it sincerely. And again, please do reach out if you have any questions or ideas you want to talk about.
Thank you so much to everyone that worked on the packet. The information was so good. And I really appreciate how much work went into it.
Thank you for reading it.
So much.
Of course. And thank you, Angela and Gail, for helping us get the agenda for this meeting together. We appreciate our co-chairs very, very, very much.
And don't forget my favorite NVCAP document.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Go G-Drive.
Thank you, Rachel.
Bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.